Chapter 1682. Wei Wei's face darkened. What do you want to say? I'm talking about your baseless conjecture. Arbor glanced at him mockingly. Did you personally see me take out extra water and food from my storage talisman as supplies? Wasn't this nonsense? He didn't follow their team all day, so he naturally couldn't have seen it with his own eyes. Seeing Instructor Wei Wei's constipated expression, Arbor said coldly, since you didn't see it, don't talk nonsense. Who told you that a storage talisman must contain a pile of food and water? As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped his hand, and a storage talisman floated between his fingers. Suddenly, the storage space opened. A pile of items splashed onto the empty space in front of the instructor like it was raining. Instantly, it wasn't just Instructor Wei Wei who looked constipated. Her teammates were also looking at her strangely. This small mountain of gold beads and gold bars in front of them. Heh, could someone explain to them what was going on? I like gold. The little stoic said coldly, I just like gold. Let me tell you, even if my inner world isn't sealed, there's nothing to eat inside. My inner world is filled with gold, silver, and jewelry. Everyone stared at her dumbstruck for a long time. Instructor Wei Wei's mouth inexplicably twitched inwardly, and he was freaking speechless for a moment. Why did he suddenly not want to talk to this student? And why did he feel like his chest and lungs were hurting from anger? Fairy, there's someone ahead. Abruptly, a somewhat hoarse voice entered Wei Wei and the others' ears. Wei Wei and the others all turned their heads to look. They saw Fairy Huang He leading a dozen or so battered soldiers and approaching them with a sickly expression. Fairy Huang He and the others were slightly pale, and their lips were chapped, looking like they were dehydrated. Following behind Fairy Huang He were several teams from other academies participating in the trial. Zhu Bozong and Ping Guang were also following behind Fairy Huang He and the others. When they saw the little stoic from afar, their expressions changed slightly, and they subconsciously blended into the crowd. Under Fairy Huang He's lead, the group of old, weak, sick, and disabled people walked to Instructor Wei Wei's side. When the students saw the amiable instructor, they almost burst into tears. Instructor Wei Wei. Teacher. What if we can't get out? Roar. The snow leopard growled in dissatisfaction. What was going on when a bunch of idiots walked over and started crying? He had disturbed its good time with the little girl. That low roar caused everyone's gazes to converge. When they saw the true appearance of the snow leopard, everyone suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air and instantly took a step back in shock. Although the snow leopard was just lying there without moving, the divine beast aura that was faintly emitted from its body made everyone feel extremely uneasy. One of the students who was participating in the entrance test could not help but gulp. His eyes revealed a trace of fear. Teacher, how did you provoke such a huge beast? Forgive them for being unable to help even if they wanted to. At a time like this, how could they still rush forward? The student shuffled backward, looking like he was about to run away. Xiao Mu glanced up at him before stroking the snow leopard's perked ears. The snow leopard shook its snow-white fur slightly. Because its fur had been smoothed, it was instantly in a good mood. It obediently lay down and stopped making noise. The student's eyes widened in shock. Go to sleep and catch up tomorrow. Chapter 1683. That student's expression changed abruptly. He pointed at Arbor and instantly shrieked, You cheated. You can actually summon mystic beasts to help. Looking at the 10 spirit beast corpses neatly arranged on the ground, jealousy flashed through the eyes of the other team students. They didn't expect that there would really be a team that could accomplish this and complete this seemingly impossible mission within 3 days. On what basis? They clearly agreed that everyone's spiritual senses were sealed and they entered Lava Mountain Range to train. On what basis could this team have mystic beasts following them? Having a profound beast by his side to assist him in hunting was a completely different battle experience compared to fighting alone. Many students looked at Xiao Mu in dissatisfaction and whispered to each other in low voices. There were even some who loudly voiced their doubts, like the student whose expression had changed abruptly. They even turned to look at instructor Wei Wei and requested that the instructor exempt Arbor's team from this time's results. "Shut up!" Fairy Huang He suddenly reprimanded them harshly, her eyes brimming with disapproval as she looked at those students. How could you all criticize your benefactor in such a manner? Previously, it was this little lady who had noble character and unquestionable integrity and disregarded her own life to lure away a powerful spirit beast, allowing us to escape from danger. Fairy Huang He said angrily, how can you repay kindness with enmity and yell at your benefactor like this? Benefactor? Not only were Qi Xianxian and the others stupefied, even instructor Wei Wei's eyes were filled with incredulity. According to their understanding of the little girl, it was impossible for the little girl to do such a thing for nothing. They didn't know if this fairy had misunderstood something. If it weren't for this little lady's help, how could we have survived until now? Fairy Huang He reprimanded loudly, didn't you guys say earlier that you should properly thank that young lady when you see her later? Could it be that this is your so-called gratitude? Shameless! Fairy Huang He's reprimand caused everyone's faces to darken. Especially the first student who questioned Arbor. He hung his head and was so ashamed that he couldn't raise it. The little stoic was expressionless, her heart completely unperturbed. In reality, she simply didn't know what the others were arguing about. Qi Xianxian, little fatty, and the others cursed in their hearts. This fairy couldn't be talking about how the little stoic lured the mystic beast horde over, picked out the spirit beasts, and killed them before driving the mystic beast horde away, right? It was clearly the little stoic who thought of a once-and-for-all lazy method to kill spirit beasts to complete the mission. Why did the fairy say that he had a noble character that no one could compare to? Qi Xianxian and the other three turned to look at the stoic face. Seeing that the latter was expressionless and gave off an unfathomable feeling, the corners of their mouths instantly twitched. Fairy Yellow Crane stepped forward and bowed to Arbor, passionately expressing her gratitude. The little stoic glanced at her silently and didn't say anything. Because she didn't know what to say. In the fairy maiden's eyes, the little stoic immediately became a good person who didn't talk much and only liked to do practical things. Miss, I'm Yellow Crane. I'm willing to befriend you, said Fairy Yellow Crane hurriedly. By the way, did anyone notice? There's a red mist in the lava mountain range, and it's blocking the way, make up for yesterday. Chapter 1684. Wei Wei looked up at the red mist above the lava mountain range and nodded indifferently. This is because lava is everywhere in the depths of the lava mountain range. This red mist will appear at the beginning of every month. But it doesn't matter. In this situation, you only need to wait for a night. When the mist dissipates tomorrow morning, you can leave. After saying this, Teacher Wei Wei specially glanced at the few groups behind Fairy Huang He. Everyone's situation was very bad. Especially Fairy Yellow Crane's team. They had agreed to leave this damned place, the lava mountain range, by today. They had always believed that they could enter Anka City and have a good rest before nightfall. In the end, once the hope in the bottom of his heart was overturned, his entire spirit and energy also collapsed. Coupled with the anxiety and uncertainty about the future, the members of Fairy Yellow Crane's team were in a very bad situation. As the leader, Fairy Yellow Crane naturally knew that her team members were in a bad situation. But now, she was like a clay bodhisattva crossing a river. She couldn't even protect herself, so how could she care about others? Since the afternoon, Fairy Yellow Crane's water supply had been cut off. Cutting off water in the scorching lava mountain range meant that they were one step closer to death. cultivators only had slightly better endurance than others. Even great spiritualists might not be able to achieve true inedia. Wei Wei asked in a low voice, "What do your team say? Do you want to leave with them or continue with the unfinished entrance test mission? If we persevere until the end, can you guarantee that we'll definitely be able to enter the academy?" A student licked his dry lips and suddenly asked. Wei Wei glanced at him indifferently and shook his head. "I can't guarantee it." In reality, the top academies would not recruit more than 3 students every year. The academy had always been working towards cultivating elite students. The good and the bad were uneven. Even if there were many students, it would not be of much use. The students who would stay in the top academies in the end would definitely be the 3 most outstanding students in this batch. There was no need to doubt this. When the student heard him say such heartless words, his face immediately turned green with anger. Since there was no guarantee that he would be able to enter the academy, who would be happy to continue tormenting himself? If he continued tormenting himself like this, his life would be over. He would not be able to enter the academy before he died. Ha! Who could accept this? What kind of top-notch academy was this? It wasn't even as famous as the 4 great academies. No one would be willing to sacrifice their time and life for such an unknown academy. In the end, they might even end up with nothing. Although it had only been 2 nights in the lava mountain range, it felt like 2 to 3 years had passed. It was torturous. Behind Fairy Yellow Crane, several student groups were clamoring that they wanted to immediately leave the mountain and never have any interaction with the top academies again. When Instructor Wei Wei heard this, he simply nodded his head indifferently. He didn't even try to persuade him to stay. If he wanted to stay, he would stay. If he wanted to leave, he would leave. This was his attitude. This made those students who had spent so much effort to no avail feel somewhat dejected. The crowd that was already irritated by the lack of water suddenly became restless. Chapter 1685. However, due to Fairy Yellow Crane's benefactor excuse, the group was a bit embarrassed and directly asked Arbor and the others if they had water. Arbor was currently tidying up the pile of treasures at Instructor Wei Wei's feet with his head lowered. After being interrupted by Fairy Yellow Crane and the others, Instructor Wei Wei forgot to ruthlessly teach this student a lesson. How can you use your inner world? A youth participating in the entrance test couldn't help but question when he saw Arbor unhurriedly tidying up the pile of treasures on the ground with bulging eyes. Although Fairy Yellow Crane felt her mouth and tongue dry, she still couldn't resist jumping out to stop that youth. "Why are you making a fuss? Did you not understand what I said just now? Daring to raise your voice at my benefactor means you're going against me." That youth couldn't help but grit his teeth and whisper, "Fairy, could you have seen wrongly? We're all well aware of Arbor's strength. He's only a level 15 minor success great mystic cultivator. You're saying he entered a mystic beast horde alone and even lured away the spirit beasts. No one would believe you if you said that. Punk, are you courting death?" Seeing that Fairy Yellow Crane was about to attack him, that youth hastily shrunk his neck and retreated a step. He stammered awkwardly, I am only judging the matter as it stands. After all, your words are very different from Miss Chiao's own strength. If Miss Chiao was a leveled 15 great spiritual cultivator, then it was still acceptable for her to enter a mystic beast horde alone and safely lure away the spirit beasts. But right now, this little lady surnamed Xiao was only a level 15 great mystic cultivator. In terms of cultivation, which one of the people present wasn't a level 13 great mystic cultivator or above? Could there be such a big difference between 2 levels? Oh, a dozen or so level 13 great mystic cultivators couldn't beat a mystic beast horde, but a little lady could easily enter and exit a mystic beast horde and lure away the spirit beasts. That was impossible. Fairy Yellow Crane most likely so wrongly due to her old age. Fairy Yellow Crane was just about to swing her fist and punch that punk in the face. On the other side, the little stoic had calmly finished packing up her things. She didn't even look up and directly walked to the snow leopard's side. She jumped onto its back and rubbed its snow-white fur. "Let's go." Roar. The snow leopard turned around and faced the students with different expressions with its butt. With Arbor on its back, it walked gracefully. Qi Xianxian and the rest did not hesitate and hurriedly followed behind. They did not even look at the group of students. A bunch of idiots couldn't be bothered with them. In fact, Jojo was the one who had caused the mystical beast horde. But if Jojo hadn't chased the mystical beasts away, would these idiots still be alive? He even dared to question Jojo's actual combat ability. He's really something. If Jojo really wanted to argue with them, even if they ganged up on Jojo, they would not be able to gain any advantage. If Jojo claimed to be number 2 in terms of actual combat, no one would dare to claim to be number 1. Hey, wait. When the group of students saw Arbor and the others leave without looking back, they immediately became anxious. The youth who spoke even chased after them and asked with an unsightly expression, "Wait. I saw many water sacks hanging from the little fatty's waist earlier. Since we're acquaintances, why don't you give a few water sacks too?" Scram! Arbor turned around and used a mystic energy to force back the youth who chased after them. He knitted his thin brows and swept him a displeased glance. Chapter 1686. Boom! From the outside, it looked as if the entire 17th floor of the Tower of Punishment, which was completely black and enveloped in a ring of raging flames, had suddenly shuddered a few times. The walls of the tower below the 14th floor were all shaken by a powerful air current, and cracks began to appear on them. Soon, as the ring of raging flames emitted a dazzling red light, the 17th floor of the Tower of Punishment slowly began to repair itself under the scorching red light. As time passed, the cracks on the tower's walls began to slowly heal. At this moment, little Tai Sui, who was sitting in the center of the 14th floor of the tower, was tightly pursing his thin lips, and his forehead was overflowing with sweat. His battle with Mo Lien had lasted for a full 3 days and 2 nights. What shocked him was that the human was still not exhausted even after fighting for so long. Not only was she not exhausted, but she was also becoming more and more courageous as the battle went on, and there was a faint sign that she was about to overpower him. What was going on? He had only been here for a few years, and this human from the lower star field had evolved into such a freak. Dao Wuji smiled wretchedly and crossed his arms over his chest. "Little Tai Sui, I see that you're about to die, so why are you still holding on?" The two of them had been fighting since 3 days ago. From close combat to long-range attacks with divine power, and even upgraded to the current battle of divine senses, it could be said that he had used all means and methods. The juniors of today really made him want to have a whole new level of respect for them. This kid in front of him was only in his early 20s, but his strength and cultivation base were simply breathtaking. The passageway to the 14th floor lit up slightly, and Dao Wuji couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Oh, Peony Fairy, you can't stand the loneliness and came to find a man again. Go to hell." The Peony Fairy glared at him in annoyance, and then her gaze fell on the 2 people on the stage, one sitting and one standing. Little Tai Sui was sitting cross-legged, and sweat was seeping out of his forehead. She then looked at the young man standing with his eyes closed. His expression was indifferent and cold, and he didn't seem to be under much pressure. From an outsider's point of view, the 2 of them looked calm. In truth, they didn't know that the 2 of them had reached the most crucial moment of the battle. At this moment, the 2 consciousnesses were competing with their consciousnesses in the boundless desert. Each of them held a sword and flew back and forth. From time to time, the two figures would exchange punches and kicks. Sparks flew as the two swords clashed. At this moment, the little Tai Sui had a cold expression on his face, and his face was as handsome as jade. He was about the same height as Mo Lien, and he looked nothing like the child he was in the outside world. This was the manifestation of little Tai Sui's divine sense. The two of them had been fighting for at least an entire night in this space. Little Tai Sui had clearly discovered that as time passed, its opponent's consciousness projection seemed to be becoming more and more substantial. On the other hand, he had been stabbed several times by Mo Lien's long sword, and his spiritual body was on the verge of collapse. Little Tai Sui frowned slightly, and a vicious look appeared on its face. It suddenly bit the tip of its tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood. In reality, the onlookers only saw that little Tai Sui, who was sitting there, spat out a mouthful of blood, and then collapsed to the ground with a dispirited face. Dao Wuji laughed and was just about to say, "Little Tai Sui, you lost," when he saw a trace of blood dripping from the corner of Mo Lien's mouth. Dao Wuji couldn't help but be startled, and then he hurried forward. "Boss." The Luo brothers looked at him with disdain and said, "Go away, who's your boss? Hurry up, should we help boss sit down? Boss seems to be injured too." Chapter 1687. Dao Wuji, you idiot. Stop it. Just as the peony fairy finished speaking, she saw Limitless Blade, who had just reached out to touch Mo Lien, howl. Then, like a ball, he was sent flying by an invisible force. The peony fairy curled her lips and threw a contemptuous look at Dao Wuji. He actually dared to reach out and touch a God-state master who was in a fierce battle of divine sense bodies. This guy's head must have been bitten by a pig. The fact that he wasn't crippled was because he was being merciful. Who didn't protect their physical body before the battle of divine sense bodies? Otherwise, what if the physical body was destroyed in the middle of the battle? Moreover, this young man who looked very powerful in front of her was really just a God-state master. A God-state master could hold on for so long under the hands of an immortal venerable and still have the upper hand. The peony fairy only felt that it was incredible. Ginkgo fairy, who was standing beside her, stared at Prince Mo without blinking, with pink bubbles in her eyes. Wow! This young man is really young and powerful. The most important thing is that he is very handsome. My heart is moved, so moved. Ginkgo fairy felt that she couldn't resist the call of love and stepped into the abyss of love first. The young man in front of her was really fascinating. As soon as the peony fairy turned her head, she saw her younger sister's foolish and intoxicated look. She stretched out her foot and kicked Ginkgo fairy's butt. Don't think about it. He just said that he has a wife. Ginkgo fairy clasped her hands and suddenly sneered, so what if he has a wife? Even if he has a wife, I can still make him have no wife. The peony fairy thought that it was true. If that guy Yuan Shichin told her that he had a wife, then she could also make him have no wife at any time. Thinking of this, the peony fairy touched her chin and pondered for a moment before saying, "What if you can't beat his wife?" Ginkgo fairy was stunned, as if she had never thought about this problem. Turning her head to look at her sister, Ginkgo fairy pinched the silk handkerchief in her hand and snorted, "How can I not beat her? There is no what if." The peony fairy thought about it and agreed. They were celestial venerables, how could they lose to a young daughter-in-law? Even thinking about it was impossible. Is it okay to bully the weak? The peony fairy looked at her younger sister and asked. What's wrong with that? Fairy Ginkgo roared arrogantly, and then coughed lightly, and said somewhat guiltily, "It's not very good. But who asked his wife to like the same man as me? If I don't bully her, how can I get her man? At most, I'll compensate her." Fairy Ginkgo raised her chin and muttered in a low voice. The peony fairy nodded, all right then. As soon as he finished speaking, the young man standing opposite him suddenly opened his cold and emotionless phoenix eyes. The peony fairy was startled and hurriedly ran to Yuan Shichin, brother Yuan Shichin. The venerable peach blossom immortal had been there the entire time, but he was bored watching Mo Lien and little Tai Sui fight. He sat in a corner and drank fake wine. How could there be wine in the Tower of Punishment? It was illusory and tasteless. Thinking of food, the little girl's paradise planet flashed before the venerable peach blossom immortal's eyes, and he sighed softly, that's really a good place. Chapter 1688. Sir, are you all right? Celestial Maiden Ginkgo walked over to Mo Lien with a smile. Mo Lien dodged and didn't say anything to her. Celestial Maiden Ginkgo's smile froze on her face. It was hard for a delicate beauty like her to greet him with a smile, but he actually turned a blind eye to her and dodged to the side. Was this man blind? At this moment, little Tai Sui opened its eyes and patted the non-existent dust off its body. It stood up and looked around with a cold expression. Then, it raised its eyebrows and frowned slightly. What are you all doing here? Who allowed you bumpkins to come to my 14th floor? Do you not want to live anymore? Little Tai Sui's angry roar startled the Luo brothers on the 10th floor, Thin Tuchuo on the 11th floor, Ginkgo Fairy on the 12th floor, Peony Fairy on the 13th floor, and Limitless Blade, who was enjoying the show. However, when they saw a faint wisp of divine power flowing over his palm, they knew that this child was sulking and was looking for a punching bag. Fuck. It was their fault. They had all come to the 14th floor to watch, but little Tai Sui had failed to defend the 14th floor of the Tower of Punishment. You've been humiliated. You're in a bad mood. Everyone was secretly amused and covered their mouths with their hands. Little Tai Sui's cute and handsome face scowled, and its childish voice was cold and merciless. If you don't piss off, I'll make you all hang here. Don't go down. TCH. Before Dao Wuji had a chance to provoke it, he saw Celestial Maiden Ginkgo staring at little Tai Sui with stars in her eyes. Dao Wuji couldn't help but be dumbfounded. You're looking at an 8 or 9-year-old boy with such an infatuated expression. Is it appropriate for you to not even let a child go? Little Tai Sui, let's go right away. One of the Luo brothers hurriedly said. He turned and exchanged a glance with Mo Lien before leading the group toward the entrance to the 15th floor. Stop right there. Little Tai Sui suddenly shouted to stop them. Everyone turned their heads helplessly, waiting for the mature voice but the appearance of a child to reprimand him. I'll go up with you. Everyone! Exclamation point. Then why did you waste so much time talking to Mo Lien and hit her for 3 days and 2 nights? Was that a joke? Wouldn't it have been better if he had let them go earlier? Little Tai Sui silently glanced at Mo Lien and said with a mature expression, this venerable is just a little curious. I wonder if you can pass the 15th floor. Can you reveal who is guarding the 15th floor? Hee hee. Little Tai Sui sneered and glanced at Dao Wuji who was speaking. You failed to challenge the 13th floor, and now you're just following others. What right do you have to ask me so many questions? Get lost. Wuji Dao was speechless. The child's cold eyes told Dao Wuji a fact, people who freeload had no human rights. How infuriating. He really wanted to grab this kid who was scolding him with a straight face and give him a good beating. Mo Lien's team seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. Now, all the guardians from the 10th floor to the 14th floor were following behind them. Each and every one of them had the expression of a spectator. With the addition of Dao Wuji and Ma Shichin, this team had quite a sizable number. When everyone arrived at the 15th floor and saw that it was completely empty, they all became wary, catch up on the latest chapter after waking up. Chapter 1689. Little Tai Sui coldly glanced at Dao Wuji, the Luo brothers, and the others. He snorted and said to everyone in a very annoying voice, "There's no need to look. There are no guardians on this floor." Ha! Dao Wuji turned to look at little Tai Sui in disbelief. How is that possible? There was a guardian on every floor of the 17 floors of the Tower of Punishment. This was a rule. Suddenly, there was no guardian on the 15th floor. Dao Wuji couldn't accept it. Happiness came so suddenly. Without a guardian, did that mean they could directly go to the 16th floor? Ha ha ha. Then he turned to look at Prince Mo's cold and unperturbed expression. Dao Wuji couldn't help but think to himself, boss is boss. Even if he's happy, he won't show it on his face. Little Tai Sui clearly saw the meaning in Dao Wuji's silly eyes. He sneered at him. Don't be happy too early. None of you will be able to pass this floor. Although there were no guardians, there was a formation. This 10,000-year talisman formation will let you have a taste of joy. From the moment you set foot on the 15th floor, everyone has already entered the formation, little Tai Sui reminded coldly. I wish you good luck. Formation. Dao Wuji and the others looked around in confusion. It was still the same empty 15th floor. There was no sign of anything strange. At this moment, Mo Lian, who was standing in the crowd, suddenly summoned 3 purple flames from her fingers. She threw them at the people around her expressionlessly. Whoosh! The flames rose. Boundless Blade, who had been chattering away beside Mo Lian, turned into a wisp of black energy amidst the flames and slipped away with a whoosh. It turned out that when Mo Lian and the others reached the 15th floor of the Tower of Punishment, everyone had already entered the formation, just as little Tai Sui said. Moreover, they were separated by the formation. The teammates around him were not real teammates. They were just illusions created by the formation. It was only because little Tai Sui had specially reminded him that Crown Prince Mo abruptly came to his senses. Of course, whether or not Boundless Blade and those other people's pig brains had thought of this was not something Crown Prince Mo could care about right now. The scene before Prince Mo's eyes had already changed. He, who was originally standing in an empty tower, now appeared in a spacious hall. Inside the hall, there was a 7-story platform, and on top of it was a white jade throne carved with a dragon and inlaid with gold. There were incense tables on both sides of the room, and sandalwood was burning in the burner. As far as the eye could see, it was shrouded in smoke, giving off a solemn and dignified feeling. But this was not the main point. The important thing was the little girl behind the throne. He was no more than 7 years old and was kneeling on the ground with his back facing him. He seemed to be very busy. He saw that her sleeves were rolled up to the crook of her arm, revealing 2 fair and tender arms. Only when he got closer did he see clearly what this little fellow was busy with. She was putting pieces of gold bars as wide as her palm into a floral package. A strange feeling slid through Crown Prince Mo's heart. This back view. Why did she look so much like his baby? A bad premonition suddenly arose in his heart. He had already walked around to the back of the platform. This time, he could clearly see that it was not just one little girl who was busy. There were clearly 8, 9, or 10 little girls who were all busy moving gold bars. Some were standing, some were sitting, some were lying down, some were crawling. Every single one of them was working so hard to pack the gold bars. This chapter adds to yesterday's drop. Chapter 1690. There was no longer any facial paralysis on those little faces. Instead, every face was filled with joyful smiles. Prince Mo was stunned for a moment. Where did all these babies come from? When one of them finished packing a bundle of gold bars, the other one helped put the bundle on her back. That heavy gold bar immediately pressed down on the little fellow's body, and she was pressed down by the gold bar. Prince Mo did not even think as he walked over. He quickly bent down to pick up the bundle on her back. Who would have thought that the little thing would be so overbearing? She hugged the bundle on her back and angrily glared at him with accusatory eyes. Ah! That's not it. This prince did not want to steal your bundle. More than a dozen little fellows with short arms and legs swarmed over. Some hugged his legs and pulled his robes, some jumped on his back and pulled his hair, and some even grabbed his hand and bit it. It was like he had done something unforgivable. In reality, he had seen that the bundle was pressing down on this baby until she almost fainted, so he was kind enough to take it for her. Mo Lian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What kind of illusion was this? This strange illusion, how could there be so many 7-year-old Jojo? This kind of illusion, what was it testing him for? Crown Prince Mo sighed as he pulled down the string of chow chow hanging on his body one by one, arranging them neatly one by one. Looking at this group of little fellows, they were all staring at him with the same expression. Without knowing why, Prince Mo felt that it was very funny. After rubbing one's head, then the other's head, Crown Prince Mo probed, "How about, I help you move it? Where do you want to move to?" One of the little Jojo stood up, followed by the second one, then the third and fourth, forming a line. Prince Mo's lips twitched. 2 Jojo ran forward at the same time to grab the bundle of gold bars on the ground. Crown Prince Mo followed over and picked up all the bundles on the ground. When he saw that the group of little Chow Chow was about to dash over to attack him again, he hastily retreated and said, both amused and exasperated, "I'll help you move them over. Lead the way." The leading Jojo looked at him suspiciously. With a wave of his little hand, he turned around and led the group of Jojo to the back of the hall. Crown Prince Mo quickly followed after her. A group of short-limbed little Jojos ran in front of him, turning their heads to look at him from time to time. When the group arrived at the back of the hall, Prince Mo realized that most of the space in the back of the hall was filled with gold bars. 17 or 18 Jojos were hanging on the small mountain of gold bars, their expressions different as they caressed the gold bars, their eyes filled with intoxication. This. Prince Mo almost burst out laughing. That's right, when they first met, the 7-year-old Jojo was always a little money grubber. Where do I put it? Prince Mo followed the leading little Jojo and put the bundle in the place she pointed out. Could it be that this glyph formation was testing his resistance to Jojo? Was there a need to test it? There was definitely no need. At this time, Yuan Shichin, who entered the glyph formation with him, had already come out of the first glyph formation illusion. Looking at the golden hall and gold and silver that had disappeared behind her, Yuan Shichin understood that the first glyph formation illusion was meant to test a person's resistance to money. For the Crown Prince, this shouldn't be a big problem. Chapter 1691. Northern Prince Mo was in a high position. What did he not have? Naturally, he would not be blinded by a little bit of wealth. However, what Hu Shichin did not know was that Prince Mo had really been left behind in the Hall of Wealth. It was not that he was blinded by the wealth, but that pile of babies was really lively and charming. Prince Mo was personally moving gold bars for the babies. It was hard for Hu Shichin to remember him after exiting the first layer of the formation illusion. Then, he entered the second layer of the formation. This time, the world spun. When Hu Shichin woke up, it was already dusk. He was in the clouds and did not know where he was. He could only hear the noise of the bustling street. There was a faint voice in the bottom of his heart that warned him not to be blinded, not to be. Gongzi, what kind of beauty does this tower not have? Gongzi, quickly come up and take a look, Gongzi. The corner of Hu Shichin's mouth twitched. He felt that his sleeve was being tugged by a soft little hand. Lowering his head, he saw a 7 or 8-year-old little girl with a pale little face. She was using her little hand to tug at his sleeve and looking at him pitifully. At first glance, Ma Shurchin felt that this little lass looked somewhat familiar. These eyebrows, this little nose, this little mouth. Wasn't she a miniature version of Jojo? Hu Shurchin instantly felt sweat on his forehead. What kind of formation illusion was this? Could it be that it could extract part of his memories and tamper with them as it pleased? Big brother, someone is chasing after me. Help me. Hu Shurchin turned his head to take a look. Indeed, he saw 4 or 5 extremely fierce and burly men running towards him. Although he was very clear that he was definitely in another layer of illusion, his emotions actually won over his reason. Without thinking, he reached out and picked up the little guy, quickly leaving. At this time, the bunch of Jojo who were reluctantly hugging Prince Mo's leg were crying and complaining with tears in their eyes. One after another, they looked at the crown prince who was about to abandon them and leave. I've already moved the gold mountains for you. Prince Mo said helplessly, if we don't leave now, we'll be trapped here forever by this talisman array. A bunch of Jojo were crying, and the scene was very lively. Prince Mo regretted that he did not have the time now. Otherwise, he would have drawn them all up so that he could show his Jojo in the future. Prince Mo glanced at the mountain of gold that filled the entire back of the palace, then calmly retracted his gaze. When he lifted his foot and walked out of the hall, he turned around and saw that the magnificent hall had already turned into a pile of ashes. He could not help but sigh in his heart. This glyph array seemed a little interesting. As soon as he entered the formation, he drew out the person he wanted to see in the void. He was almost fooled by this array and stayed here to carry the gold bars for the Jojo. That he wasn't greedy for wealth. Instead, he was truly greedy for the happy expressions of the Jojo when they were hanging on the gold bars. Leaving the Hall of Wealth, he did not know what else was waiting for him. Prince Mo's lips curled up slightly. He suddenly felt a sense of weightlessness all over his body. His entire body was falling with the sound of the wind by his ears. Big brother, someone is chasing after me. Help me. If Mo Lien could see Hu Shurchin's illusion, she would definitely be shocked to find that the two of them were going through the same illusion one after the other. Chapter 1692. Picking up the little princess who was being hunted down on the streets, bringing her back to Rays, helping her defeat her ambitious siblings, grooming her, and helping her ascend to the throne of the little queen. This series of events happened naturally. Everything was inexplicable. Many times, Hu Shurchin almost couldn't remember where she was. Was she living in an illusion, or was she living in reality? This dreamlike talisman matrix was too torturous. Mo Lien started to admire the master who made this talisman matrix. He was definitely a talisman master who stood out from the rest. This talisman matrix could even bring them into a completely different world. This world had a predetermined development routine. Starting from the time he picked up the little princess who was wandering, the story developed step by step in its own direction. According to the direction of the story in this talisman matrix, Mo Lien would eventually kill this little puppet queen and ascend to the throne himself. However, this talisman matrix master was looking down on him too much. He simply didn't care about the throne of such a small country. Moreover, this little queen's face looked too much like his family's Jojo. Compared to the bunch of lively and extremely interesting Jojo he encountered in the Hall of Wealth, the one in front of him was the normal deadpan baby. Following the flow of the story in this talisman matrix, Mo Lien felt like he had spent 3 years. But in reality, he was very clear that he had only spent about 3 days in this damn talisman matrix on the 15th floor. This talisman matrix probably wanted to test his yearning for power. Unfortunately, he simply didn't have that kind of thing. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if he had the heart to fight for power and profit, how could he lay his hands on this little deadpan baby? He also didn't know what the hell this talisman matrix was up to. Why did it always give him JoJo's appearance? Could it be because he missed her too much because he thought about her in the day and dreamed about her at night? Achoo! Arbor sat on a simple wooden bed and raised his hand to rub his slightly red nose. Why was someone thinking about him again? Xiao Mook put down her cross-legged legs and jumped down from the wooden bed. The wooden door creaked open, and Qi Xianxian walked in with a wooden basin in her arms. She couldn't help but shout, "Oh my god, it's so hot outside. Jojo, quick, quick, give me some more ice. I'm going to take a battle bath. Would you like a cup of spirit tea?" Qi Xianxian hurriedly turned around to take a look. She closed the door and shook her head. "Don't. It's better for us to keep a low profile. Don't let the teachers find out. We drank spirit tea during the entrance exam." After all, he had only been in the academy for 2 days and had yet to complete the normal admission procedures. He could face the danger of being kicked out of the academy at any time. If that one-track-minded teacher Wei Wei were to discover anything, he might really be chased out. Arbor glared at her. With a wave of his little hand, he threw a few ice balls into her wooden basin. "Go wash up." Qi Xianxian beamed with joy as she nodded her head. Then, she carried the wooden basin and walked out. It wasn't that she wanted to complain about this academy, but the environment was really terrible. It was built on top of the lava mountain range. Not to mention how hot it was every day. It was said that Qi Xianxian, and Little Fatty each had their own room to live in, and it was guaranteed that they would live comfortably. In the end, when they got it, it became like this. Chapter 1693. Not to mention the furnishings in the room, even the bed and chair were extremely old. Looking at the mud walls, they were full of holes and looked like they had not been repaired for a long time. There was nothing in the room, nothing at all. When Arbor had just moved in 2 days ago, the wooden bed was dirty and there was not even a mattress. Luckily, she had packed a lot of daily necessities in the storage talisman. After making a comfortable bed for herself, she was able to lend 2 mattresses for Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian. "Qiao Qiao." Little Fatty's voice called out to her from outside. Arbor opened the door and saw Little Fatty, who was sweating profusely, walking over. As he walked, he said, "Principal Yun is back. Instructor Wei Wei asked us to gather in front of the academy peak. Hee, we can finally register for admission." Little Fatty rubbed the back of his head and laughed. He had been waiting for this day for so long that his eyes were about to tear. The other 2 senior brothers from the 2nd year and the senior brother from the 3rd year have also returned. Soon, everyone will be able to meet each other. Little Fatty said excitedly, "From what Mata said, those 3 senior brothers are all talented people. Compared to senior brother Duanmu, they are not inferior at all." Speaking of which, this top-notch academy was really hilarious. It was obviously called Top-Notch Academy, but it did not seem to be top-notch at all. Previously, before they came to participate in the entrance examination, the total number of students in the academy did not exceed 5. There were 3 in the 2nd year, including Mata, and 2 in the 3rd year. The saying that there were no more than 3 students in a year was completely true. Because until now, even if Arbor and the other 2 were included, the number of students in the entire academy could be counted with one's fingers. In this Shuntian Prefecture continent, which academy would not have more than 10 students? It was a top-notch academy. If they randomly pulled a small academy over and compared it with a top-notch academy, the number of students in the top-notch academy would be reduced in a matter of minutes. No matter how small the academy was, it should have more than 100 students, right? However, the top-notch academy was different. In 3 years, it had only recruited 9 students. It was said that one of the students had even left the academy. Because of this, he had gotten into an argument with the academy's instructor. Of the 103 peaks in the lava mountain range, only a few were habitable. Aside from the Cloudmoke Cliff where the dean lived, the instructors all lived on the instructor's peak. Regardless of whether it was studying or living, the students lived on the academy's peak. Therefore, there were actually quite a lot of small mud houses on the academy peak. To the outside world, the living conditions of the top academies were extremely good. Every student had their own small room, but could this little mud hut be considered a luxurious room? Arbor walked out of her little mud house and said to little Fatty, Xian hasn't arrived yet. You go ahead first, I'll wait for her here. Little Fatty thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, I'd better go with you. As he spoke, he saw Mata running over with a cheeky smile. He looked at them and said, What are you waiting for? Let's go. Teacher Wei Wei said that he has something important to announce today. I'm waiting for Xian. Little Fatty glanced at him. What's the big announcement? I don't know. Teacher didn't say. But even if I use my butt to think, I know that it's definitely closely related to our future training. TSK, Little Fatty snorted disdainfully. He couldn't be bothered to listen to Mata's nonsense. Chapter 1694. About 15 minutes later, Qi Xian came out of the room and saw Mata's perverted gaze. She screamed instinctively and lowered her head to look at herself. Damn, my clothes are neat and tidy. There's nothing to be alarmed about. It's all Mata's fault. He always looks at people from the bottom up. His eyes are especially perverted. He had a handsome face, but he had a pair of perverted eyes. What are you looking at? Qi Xian glared at Mata angrily. She turned around and walked towards Arbor. Qi Xian held Arbor's arm and looked at them in confusion. What's wrong? Are you all waiting for me here? Fatty nodded vigorously. Let's go. We're going to the front of the academy peak. Dean Yun Xiong is back. A few seniors are here too. Mata said that the teachers have something important to announce today. Oh. Qi Xian shrugged. She held Arbor's arm and said softly, Could it be that Wei Wei slandered us in front of the dean? This guy had been holding a grudge against Jojo for using a storage talisman in the entrance test until now. Arbor said calmly, Let him do whatever he wants. They went to the front of the academy peak's main hall. Other than Duan Muqing, there were 3 other men standing there. These 3 people should be the senior brothers of the 2nd and 3rd years of the academy. Looking at them, they should be around 25 years old. Arbor was very familiar with one of them. When they first met, it was the man in green who drew a circle on the ground with Arbor. It was Hua Tao. When the other 2 second-year senior brothers, Jiang Shaoxin and Lu Yu, saw that everyone was walking over under Mata's lead, they also nodded at Qiao Mu and the others in acknowledgement. All right, everyone's here, Teacher Wei Wei said calmly, the 3 new students, come over here to register. From today onwards, the 3 of you are official students of our top academy. Dean Yun Xiong seemed very happy. The smile on Dean Yunzhou's face deepened. He was simply letting the little girl get in based on her own ability and knowledge, instead of opening a door for her. It was hard for people to dislike such a young genius. Today, I'm not only here to welcome the 3 new students, Instructor Wei Wei continued, I have another important announcement to make. Including the 3 new students, the academy has a total of 8 people. In order to better hone your temperament and willpower, the academy has decided to abolish grades. The 8 of you will be divided into 2 groups. Everyone will start from 0 to accumulate academy points. In 3 months, those who are able to obtain more than 1,000 points will be qualified to participate in the school league. Only those who obtain 3,000 points in a year can graduate successfully. The points will be reset to 0 after the new year. In other words, if they couldn't save up 3,000 points in a year, they would have to continue learning in this lousy academy. He would continue to study for an indefinite amount of time. Little Fatty, Qi Xianxian, and Arbor looked at each other silently. Arbor immediately regretted his decision. Wasn't this academy a little too unreliable? What did it mean to be divided into 2 groups? So in the future, when they did missions, they would have to face seniors from the higher years. Also, this point system would definitely be very fraudulent. Arbor had a headache just thinking about it. In the future, they would have to walk on a rugged path of desperately earning points. Chapter 1695. The academy was definitely up to no good. There would definitely be competition between the 2 teams, and the team that lost would probably not be able to obtain any points. Wei Wei said indifferently, if you don't have any objections, come over and pay the fees. Everyone will pay 20 spirit coins once every 3 months. If you want to pay in advance, you can do so as well. I'll pay in advance. Who knows if I can stay in your academy for the full 3 months. Arbor glanced at Qi Xianxian, who was looking at her anxiously, and reluctantly went forward to pay the fees. Oh, if you pay the fees but don't listen to the teachings of the instructors, and even have delusions of running away from the academy, then the academy will be responsible for you. The vice principal will beat you until you start doubting your life. Arbor was speechless. She raised her head and looked at the flower-like and kind-looking fat vice principal. Arbor and the other students looked at each other, feeling as if they had fallen into a trap. All right, the fees have been paid. Next, I'll talk about the training goals for the next 3 months. Arbor was still hesitating when a short instructor ran forward and snatched the money bag from her hands, winking at her. Miss Chiao was furious. She hadn't thought it through. Qi Xianxian secretly grinned and thought to herself, this instructor Zhou is really a clown. Oh right, you guys can split into 2 groups first. The short instructor grinned. The 3 seniors who were familiar with each other naturally gathered together. However, what surprised them was that Mata and Duanmu Qing actually stood with the 3 freshmen and didn't rush over to their side. One of you go over. The short instructor roared at Mata. Mata immediately shook his head like a rattledrum. What a joke, he didn't want to leave Miss Chiao's team. He felt that if he stood with Arbor's team, he would definitely be in trouble. We are in the same team. Mata hurriedly said. Duanmu, you go over. Duanmu Qing shook his head. I'm not going. Wei Wei was angered to the point of laughter. It seemed that these 3 freshmen had become extremely popular, right? Then let's draw lots. Principal Yun smiled faintly. Qi Xianxian immediately hugged Arbor's arm nervously and roared at Mata, you go over. No, no, no. Arbor suddenly raised her head. She narrowed her eyes and looked at a streak of light that suddenly flew over from afar. She reached out her hand and a piece of ebony talisman turned into ashes in her palm. Arbor's black pupils were as calm as an ancient well. Suddenly, he turned around and said to Principal Yun, excuse me for a moment. One day. Principal Yun and the 5 instructors were stunned. When they looked up, Arbor had already summoned a blue bird. With a whoosh, he landed on the blue bird and flew down the mountain. Jojo, where are you going? Qi Xianxian was startled and hurriedly shouted at Arbor's departing figure. Kill. A calm and indifferent voice came into everyone's ears from afar, causing them to feel a chill in their hearts. Dean. Instructor Wei Wei looked at Dean Yun with a solemn expression. Wasn't this little girl too unruly and unruly? Dean Yun smiled and said, "It's okay, she will come back." Who hadn't been hot-blooded when they were young? Ha! Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They felt that the dean was being too lenient with the little girl. Dean Yun smiled. "You guys go draw lots first. I will go out for a moment." The little girl running out alone was naturally not reassuring. He planned to follow her and take a look. Chapter 1696. Of course, Yun Fiang would never tell them that he was only there to watch the show. He had a feeling that the little girl was going to do something earth-shattering this time. Strange. Why was he looking forward to it? Back to Arbor. After leaving the academy peak on the Blue Phoenix, she rushed toward the location indicated by the tracking talisman. Before the tracking talisman disappeared, it had already transmitted Tan Fa's location to her accurately. It was not very far. The Blue Phoenix could make a round trip in one day. Most importantly, she was very familiar with Tan Fa's hiding place. It was the place where Mata gave Qi Xianxian a trashy map, which made them look for a top academy on an unknown mountain, and where they met the little fatty later. She had just learned that the mountain was called Chi Mountain. It was outside Anka City, in the opposite direction of the lava mountain. Xiao Mu pursed her small lips and apathetically twisted open her defensive ring. She then added a defensive barrier to herself, isolating herself from the howling gales outside. She held the gold-beaded talisman pen in her right hand, and 3 blank ebony talismans floated in front of her. After a few strokes, she drew 3 puppet talismans smoothly. Then, more than 10 blank ebony talismans floated in front of her again and quickly turned into talismans under her drawing. Or rather, talismans. After more than 10 yellow-level Mysticine talismans were completed, Arbor's lips curled into a cold smile. Talismans made by a yellow-level Great Talisman Master. You're lucky. It had only been 3 days since Tan Fa escaped from the Space Talisman Array with Che Ruan, and Arbor had followed the man with the tracking talisman. She knew that as long as the monkey-faced man did not escape from the Shuntian continent, she would definitely find him in 3 days. What Arbor did not expect was that the guy was quite cunning. He did not run far before he settled down at Chi Mountain outside Anka City. Of course, maybe it was because the talisman power in the Space Talisman Array was getting weaker and weaker, and it was not enough to teleport him too far. Maybe Tan Fa was only forced to rest at Chi Mountain temporarily. Qinghuan stopped above the lush Chi Mountain and turned its head to look at Xiao Mu. "Master, it's not easy to fly here with the dense foliage." "Yes." Arbor nodded and signaled for Qinghuan to descend. He reached out and stroked Qinghuan's head, allowing it to return to Paradise Planet. She wanted to go alone, but before she could take 2 steps, she found a big furry fellow beside her, rubbing her little hand. Arbor's eyes lit up. How could she forget about Little Snow? Speaking of which, ever since she had left the lava mountain range that day, in front of a crowd of dumbfounded people, she had calmly put Little Snow away. Then, she had let Little Snow live on Paradise Planet and didn't really care about it. Now that they were running in this huge forest, Little Snow was the most suitable. Its speed was very fast, and its 4 limbs were very strong. Sitting on Little Snow's back, he only felt the wind whistling past his ears. His body was very stable, without the slightest bump. Arbor reached out to pinch the snow leopard's ear and pointed. 1 man and 1 beast stopped in front of a cave in the depths of the forest. This cave was really hidden. The front of the cave was filled with withered branches and weeds. A row of jujube trees was planted in front of the cave, but they were all drooping and withered. If one did not look carefully, it was really impossible to notice that there was a cave in the stone wall here. As soon as they approached, they could smell a faint smell of blood. Arbor frowned slightly. Chapter 1697. Oh. Arbor wondered what Tan-Fa was up to create such a strong smell of blood. Even Arbor frowned when she smelled it. Arbor patted the snow leopard's head to comfort it. She bent down and picked up the snow leopard that had shrunk into her arms. Then, she leisurely walked into the cave. The entire cave looked extremely gloomy from the outside. When she stepped in, she saw that there were 3 or 4 dim yellow lamps on the walls of the cave. The cave was empty except for a small bonfire in the corner. A small pot of boiling water was hanging from a frame. Next to it was a bunch of chopped branches. Arbor's gaze moved to the center of the cave. There was a large grayish-brown urn. The strange smell of blood was coming from the urn. Arbor walked to the front of the urn unhurriedly. The closer she got to the urn, the heavier the smell of blood became. It was extremely unpleasant. Xiao Mu's eyes flickered, and she heard a mocking laugh coming from the cave entrance. "Heya, what a rare guest, what a rare guest. Miss Xiao has graced us with your presence. How should Tan-Fa welcome you?" Arbor turned her head with a cold expression. She saw that Tan-Fa's small eyes were staring at her with a strange light. "How did you find me?" Arbor looked at him with a cold expression. She was somewhat puzzled. How did Tan-Fa's injuries heal so quickly? 3 days ago, he had clearly been turned into a dog by her backlash. Why was it that when they met again, he was as lively as a dragon and as lively as a tiger, as if he had not suffered the slightest bit of backlash? Arbor's fingers suddenly moved. She smashed the mystic guiding glyph array on herself and threw a binding glyph array at the entrance of the cave. Tan-Fa's pupils shrank. He immediately dodged to the side. Unexpectedly, he heard a bestial roar. A white light suddenly rushed to his side. With his many years of battle experience, Tan-Fa suddenly had a bad premonition. He made a prompt decision and rolled to the side. This avoided Little Snow's sudden bite. When one's life was hanging by a thread, everyone had an instinctive reaction to survive. Tan-Fa was no exception. However, just as he dodged the snow leopard's white teeth, Miss Xiao's puppet talisman arrived as well. What? Shocked, Tan-Fa hurriedly threw out a dozen yellow-ranked defensive talismans to defend himself. The yellow-level defensive talisman was naturally very effective. Seeing that the puppet talisman he threw was blocked, Arbor didn't waste his energy. He directly recalled the puppet talisman and threw out a dozen more Xian-Yin talismans. "You're a talisman master." Tan-Fa finally discovered something that made him shocked. The young girl in front of him was not a normal talisman master. She knew how to draw talismans. The dozen or so Xian-Yin talismans that she threw out were actually smoother and more natural than his grandmaster's. This. Why? Tan-Fa's heart slightly tightened, and he quickly rushed towards the large urn in the middle of the cave. "Although you are a rare charm master in the world, but today, you must die in this unknown cave. Heh, I don't care if you become my human cauldron or my puppet ghost spirit. Miss Xiao, you can only blame yourself for not wanting to walk the path to heaven. There's no door to hell, yet you insist." Ow! Before Tan-Fa could finish his string of self-righteous nonsense, he discovered that he had been sent flying to the top of the cave by a huge tail. How was this possible? Even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't dare believe that he had been slapped to the sky by this young girl before he could finish speaking. The 6th watch will be finished. However, it will be very late, so don't wait for me. Chapter 1698. Arbor expressionlessly looked at Tan-Fa, who had been whipped into the air by the little white squirrel's tail, coldly curling her lips. Then, he rushed to Tan-Fa's side with a big stride. With a flick of his finger, a puppet charm suddenly entered Tan-Fa's consciousness. Tanifei vigilantly opened his eyes wide. The sentence, "What did you do?" had only been uttered 3 words when he suddenly felt that his conscience seemed to have been poured in by a surge of power, directly tearing it apart. His entire body was in so much pain that he immediately fell to the ground, hugging his head and rolling back and forth on the ground. Arbor didn't care about him, sauntering forward, kicking open the lid of the large urn. Inside was Che Ruman's deathly pale face, which didn't surprise her in the slightest. Charm Masters had always been sinister, which was why they were despised and intolerable by the world. However, in reality, the more the Charm Masters were despised by the world, the more perverted and frightening their actions were. At this time, Che Ruman's eyes were gouged out, her tongue cut, unable to make the slightest sound. Although her 4 limbs weren't chopped off, but looking at her limp appearance, she already didn't have the tendons in her arms and legs all snapped, without the slightest strength to resist. There was a thick smell of blood in the large urn. The urn was covered with sheets of charms drawn with blood. Arbor roughly looked around. This was an extremely vicious forbidden spell, disgraced by the righteous Charm Masters. Regardless of gender, as long as the person was placed in a container covered with blood charms, and the power of the curse seeped into the person's body, it would have the effect of the blood curse. This kind of blood curse was really very nourishing for the person who drew it. Within 49 days, it could endlessly absorb the essence, energy, and vitality of the person under the curse. No wonder this damned man, in less than 3 days' time, was able to walk out from the previous serious injury of the backlash. It turned out that he had absorbed Che Ruman's power. Of course, the backlash and side effects of this kind of blood charms were very obvious. Once the absorption was interrupted midway, not only would one suffer an extremely disastrous backlash, but it would also cause the person who drew the curse to lose their cultivation to 0 for 7 days. What's more, if they went for wool and came home shorn, it would cause their bodily functions to deteriorate rapidly, and some of them would even be worse than their original body. And now, what Arbor wanted to do was to let this insidious man in front of him reap what he sowed. Ah! The man whose conscience was injured was rolling around on the ground. He suddenly raised his head and saw Arbor looking back at him coldly. His heart skipped a beat. Tanifei stretched out a hand and let out a sharp cry that even he couldn't understand. Wait! Arbor's small hand, which was covered with a layer of Vidra talisman, directly grabbed Che Ruman's hair, lifted her out of the big urn, and casually threw her aside. A light flashed in her hand, and an ordinary-looking iron hoe appeared in her hand. Clang! With a swing of the hoe, the big urn was completely smashed into pieces. Ah! Tanifei let out a blood-curdling scream as he spat out a large pool of blood from his mouth. Arbor didn't even bother to look back, and directly used the hoe to smash the big urn into smithereens, completely destroying those blood charms stuck on the urn. Tanifei collapsed on the ground, his face full of disbelief. He probably didn't expect that in just a few minutes, he was about to be killed by this savage little girl in front of him. Chapter 1699. Didn't the words he had said earlier just invite a series of jokes? He actually wanted to capture this young girl with such a high cultivation base and use her as a cauldron or vessel to increase his power, or just kill her and slowly nurture her into a ghost spirit. But he didn't expect that he would be defeated so miserably today, without even a chance to retaliate. Cough, cough, cough. Cough. The explosive pain in his conscience, in addition to the blood curse being interrupted midway, caused him to once again be engulfed by the power of the backlash, and his cultivation base was completely lost. The current Tanifei only needed one finger from Miss Chiao to crush him to death. Cough, cough. I didn't expect you to be such a righteous person. You actually risked your life to save Che Ruman, Tanifei said through gritted teeth. Today's events were so sudden that he really didn't expect Miss Chiao to find his hidden hiding place. Moreover, he didn't expect that this little girl in front of him was actually a curse master at such a young age. The little girl had been using the techniques of a curse master to fight with him. She looked so arrogant because she wanted to let him know that in terms of the art of curses, he, Tan Fa, who had studied for so many years, couldn't compare to this damned girl. After a long sigh, Tan Fa collapsed on the ground, feeling that his head was still faintly throbbing in pain. He resisted the sharp pain in his conscience and forced himself to sit up. Looking at Arbor, he said softly, "Miss Chiao, I'm sincerely convinced by you." Cough, 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 seeing that we're both from the Tao of Curses, you should be magnanimous and let me go. Come, I can use a treasure that you definitely can't imagine in exchange for my life. Tan Fa's vulgar eyes flashed slightly, and he said in a low voice, "With this kind of treasure, I can guarantee that you'll be even stronger than before." What responded to him wasn't Arbor's joyful appearance, but a poison dart that flew straight for his throat. Tan Fa rolled on the ground in a sorry state, but he still couldn't completely avoid that poison dart. The poisonous dart landed on his shoulder, and in a split second, the terrifying poisonous gas converged into a black line from his shoulder and rapidly spread towards her limbs. Tan Fa's eyes widened in horror. He suddenly raised his head and glared at Arbor. You. Why did you do this to me?" Arbor didn't even look at him. He threw a look at Snowy. The snow leopard roared and rushed forward. It slapped Tan Fa's head with its paw, and its sharp claws ripped off half of his head on the spot. Even until his death, Tan Fa still couldn't understand how this savage little girl could act so unconventionally. He hadn't even finished telling her about the baby. How could she be so impatient as to reach out and slap him to death? Didn't she want to ask who he was? Why would he appear here? Tan Fa was completely dead. He couldn't be more dead. His eyes were tightly shut, and half of his skull was exposed. Arbor looked up at Tan Fa and said coldly, "My master once told me. Don't talk nonsense when you're fighting. Just go straight up. Don't talk nonsense when you're crippled. You can't imagine the strength of a dying person's counterattack." In the depths of Arbor's memory, the image of Xian Huang holding her little hand and earnestly teaching her appeared. Chapter 1700. She couldn't help but stare blankly. Arbor thought, this scene that suddenly appeared seemed to be yesterday, appearing in front of her eyes, vivid and clear. Did she remember the time when she was with Master? Frowning and lowering her little head, Arbor racked her brain for a long time and couldn't help but sigh in disappointment. Her brain was so stupid. She could forget such an important thing. What a pighead. Arbor raised her hand and knocked her little head, turning her head to look at Che Rumen, who was lying motionless in the corner. She quickly walked forward and narrowed her eyes to take a look. Che Rumen was facing the sky, her unfocused eyes were already dilated and dilated. She was already dead. But this was normal. Ever since Tan Fa put the blood curse on Che Rumen, her life and cultivation were closely linked to Tan Fa. Tan Fa was dead, so she couldn't survive alone. And with her current state, there wouldn't be any happiness even if she forced herself to live. Arbor walked back to Tan Fa's corpse with half of his head and looked at him with disdain. Only then did she mobilize all of her spiritual sense, penetrating and seizing the other's consciousness and inner world. Tan Fa's inner world was very rich in resources, and Arbor obtained a lot of resources from Tan Fa's inner world, including spiritual medicine, spirit stones, and some cultivation resources, as well as a few ores and refining materials. Arbor didn't expect Tan Fa, this wretched man, to be so good at accumulating wealth. But thinking about it, as a yellow-level charm master, 10FA's speed of accumulating wealth shouldn't be any slower than a charm master. After Arbor finished tidying up some of 10FA's supplies, she glanced at a pinkish-purple jade pendant that fell on the ground from the corner of her eye. Arbor bent down to pick up the jade pendant. Turning it around, she just happened to see the 3 words, Clear Sky Gate, engraved on the back. Her eyes immediately turned cold, and she lightly read out these 3 words. Clear Sky Gate. Wasn't that the Clear Sky Gate where Fan Gu was the vice leader? To tell the truth, ever since that Fan Gu took her nephew Fan Chioha and fled back to Shantian continent, she had always been thinking about them in her heart. Great! She hadn't even gone to their door to settle the score with this aunt and niece pair, and now they had already sent a vanguard to test the waters. Arbor's lips curled into a sneer. He flipped through some of the talismans that 10FA had placed in his inner world. There weren't many of them, only a dozen or so. Most of them were Xian-Yin talismans. In reality, whether it was a symbol charm master or a symbol charm master, it was impossible for their drawing speed to be too fast. Ordinary talisman masters and talisman curse masters could draw 10 or so blue talismans in a day. They could already be considered experts with an extremely high success rate. Unlike Arbor, which had already reached a 100% success rate in forming blue talismans. After putting away these talismans, Xiao Mu discovered that there was also a small, squarish, red wooden box underneath these talisman papers. When he opened it, he saw a small black bead that looked like an ordinary wooden carving. It didn't emit any light at all. Arbor only felt curious. Seeing how 10FA had hidden this black bead so preciously in the wooden box, Arbor roughly knew that this little plaything was perhaps the unexpected treasure that 10FA had mentioned. But what exactly was the use of this plaything? Master, this is a ghost spirit bead. The little tree Chocho's strange voice suddenly sounded in her ears. What was a ghost spirit bead? Arbor expressed that she had never seen such a strange bead. Chapter 1701. Master, why don't you use your spiritual awareness to open it? It's possible that the charm master from earlier had put some kind of ghost spirit inside. Arbor was taken aback, but she nodded and used her spiritual awareness to enter this ghost spirit pearl. The originally ordinary wooden ghost spirit bead suddenly emitted bursts of brilliance, extremely dazzling. When her spiritual awareness entered, she could see that there was actually a 9-layered talisman array inside the ghost spirit pearl. Each layer contained extremely strong curse power. Not to mention those wandering ghost spirits, even if a talisman master was caught, he might not be able to break this 9-layered array and come out. Of course, this wooden pearl was most likely only able to store and release ghost spirits. Normal humans naturally could not enter. Master, there's a female ghost spirit kowtowing and greeting you. Why don't you have any reaction? Arbor was taken aback when she heard that. She turned to look at Little Tree squatting on her shoulder. What female ghost spirit? Where is she? Right beside your feet. Little Tree looked at her speechlessly. Just now, you opened the ghost spirit pearl and let her out. Arbor was taken aback. She looked around and muttered softly, where is this female ghost spirit? Master, you can't see it. Little Tree grinned at her. Speaking of which, it was strange. She had always been in a state where she could not see ghost spirits. In the past, when she returned to Kwoto village with the little monk even opened her eyes in all seriousness, but she still could not see anything. Wait, let me use my spiritual awareness to take a look. If she could not see ghost spirits in front of her with her ordinary eyes, perhaps her spiritual awareness would be of some use. You still can't see anything. Little Tree Chocho looked at Arbor curiously. Arbor withdrew her spiritual awareness gloomily and nodded. What did she say? It's nothing. She kowtowed to you while trembling. She even said that she'll listen to everything you say in the future and won't cause you any trouble. Chocho rolled its eyes and said. This female ghost spirit looked so cowardly. What could she do by keeping her by her side? Wasn't it a waste of food? Oh, that's not right. A female ghost wouldn't waste food. Arbor put away the invisible female ghost. Blinking his eyes, he asked the small tree, do you think the unexpected treasure that Tan-Fa mentioned just now is this ghost spirit bead? That's hard to say. The little tree shook its head and said, this ghost spiritual bead's target area is extremely small. If it weren't for Master's extraordinary spiritual sense, who could reach the 4th level of spiritual sense at your level of cultivation? Arbor was stunned. He picked up the wooden ghost spirit bead and looked at it, then put it away for the time being. Little Snow, chirp, let's go. Arbor waved at the fat squirrel that was jumping on a rock. The fat squirrel hurriedly ran over and jumped into Arbor's arms. Arbor hugged it and called the snow leopard out of the door. The moment the man and the 2 beasts walked out of the door, they heard a huge explosion that instantly flattened the entire cave. Arbor used the fire explosion talisman, so its power was naturally extraordinary. In an instant, the entire cave turned into a fiery purgatory. Looking back at the withered branches and leaves crackling under the intense fire, Arbor's lips curled into a faint sneer. Tossing a pinkish-purple jade pendant in his palm, Arbor asked Chocho, do you know where the Clear Sky sect is staying? Others had already made a move, so how could she passively take a beating? Chapter 1702. Do we have a way to find out where the Clear Sky sect's lair is? The feeling of being coveted in the dark like this really wasn't pleasant. Arbor liked to do things directly and efficiently. Since she had already identified the existence of the enemy, she naturally had to think of a way to get rid of them all. Chocho waved 2 thin branches and climbed onto Arbor's shoulder. Shaking its head, it said, we just arrived at Shantian Prefecture and aren't too familiar with the environment here. Master, why don't you bear with it for a while? Once Chocho establishes a certain connection with the spirits of vegetation on the Shantian Prefecture continent, we can easily gather some useful information. That was the only way. Arbor naturally knew that some things couldn't be rushed. Chocho had just entered the late stage of its infant stage. If she used up too much of its power, it might be so tired that it would go into seclusion again. According to her observations, this little tree was very likely the main body of the holy wood of the 5 spirits. Although she still didn't understand why this tree grew in her Dantian's mystic domain since her rebirth, she still didn't understand. Arbor raised her hand to rub the little Trent's head. Let's go. Roar. The snow leopard nestled beside her suddenly roared angrily, and its huge body suddenly rushed in front of Arbor to block her. The 4 or 5 arrows that were flung in the air were all swatted away by the snow leopard's steel claws. Arbor looked coldly at the row of masked gray-clothed people who had suddenly appeared. Every single one of them used a gray veil to cover their faces and held a heavy bow in their hands. They did not hesitate to shoot at her. Don't underestimate these arrows. They weren't bows that ordinary people could draw. Each of these arrows was imbued with the spirit energy in their bodies, so their range was very long and their speed was abnormally fast. After the snow leopard swatted away several arrows with its claws, all kinds of spirit energy exploded in the air, forming a steaming spirit mist. There were about 30 people in that row of masked gray-clothed people, and they all moved extremely quickly. Although they were slightly taken aback when they saw such a huge snow leopard, they quickly got to work again. The gray-clothed masked men rushed towards Arbor, and the bows in their hands continued to shoot arrows without delay. The arrowheads formed a rain of arrows that blotted out the sky as they rained down on Chao Mu. Arbor's eyes turned cold. Her expression didn't change as she opened her defensive barrier. With a wave of her finger, countless defensive talismans lined up in the air and surrounded her body. The row of arrows was blocked by the defensive talisman. Several of the masked men in gray had already arrived in front of Arbor, and a huge net appeared in their hands, aiming for Arbor's waist. From the looks of it, these people wanted to capture her alive. Arbor sneered and raised his eyebrows. The gray-clothed masked men in front of her were all level 4 spiritual masters. Fan Gu, the vice leader of the Clear Sky sect, had invested a lot in her. Moreover, they came too quickly, so Xiao Mu could not help but be suspicious. This Fan Gu, had she been keeping an eye on her all this while? Had she been keeping an eye on her all this while? For example, Fan Gu would know the moment she went to Shantian Prefecture. Another example was when she went to participate in the entrance exam of a top academy, and Fan Gu actually sent Tan Fa to sneak in, wanting to make her a puppet talisman and secretly kill her. Although Fan Gu didn't succeed in all of this, Arbor felt inexplicably unhappy at the thought of a damned bug trying to bite her all day long. Chapter 1703. She was inexplicably displeased, but she could only endure it for now. After all, she had just entered Shantian Prefecture. As the saying went, even a powerful dragon could not suppress a local snake. In the future, when she found out where their nest was, she would make them suffer. Arbor jumped onto the snow leopard's back with a flip. He narrowed his black eyes and solemnly glanced at the group of masked gray-clothed people. "Today, all of you will stay here for me," Arbor said coldly, his eyes devoid of any warmth. He looked at them as if he was looking at a group of dead people. The leader of the masked gray-clothed people couldn't help but snicker, but he didn't say anything. He merely waved his hand resolutely, and the group of spiritual cultivators threw away the bows in their hands. They each picked up their handy weapons and surrounded Arbor, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. The little fat squirrel swung its several-meter-long tail and smacked a person's head. Everyone watched helplessly as their teammate was instantly smashed into meat paste by a fat squirrel's tail. Almost all of them stopped in their tracks as their bodies stiffened slightly. The two beasts beside Miss Chiao seemed to be extraordinary. The group was a bit apprehensive of the two beasts' martial prowess, so they hesitated and didn't dare to step forward for the time being. However, Arbor wouldn't be courteous to them. A thin piece of paper abruptly flew out from her conscience. Ever since the battle at the Holy Water sect's main peak, she had never taken out this Tianji treasure blueprint to use. Especially when she was only a mere level 11 mystic cultivator back then, but she had already risked her life to open the 4th layer of the Tianji treasure blueprint and triggered it to launch an indiscriminate AoE attack. Then now, she could already easily activate the 5th and even 6th layers of the Tianji treasure blueprint. This Tianji treasure blueprint was clearly a divine weapon. Senior Tianji Z had probably stored all the concealed weapons he had made in his lifetime into this Tianji treasure blueprint. The combination of the two had enormous power. Moreover, there was a feeling of an inexhaustible supply. Because this Tianji treasure blueprint itself was similar to a concealed weapon box for storing concealed weapons, Xiaomu still hadn't figured out how much capital the Tianji master had invested back then and how many concealed weapons he had placed inside. Of course, a portion of the hidden weapons could still be recycled into the Tianji treasure blueprint. She didn't need to waste any effort. After the battle, she just needed to take out the Tianji treasure blueprint again and walk around the arena. Hidden weapons that could be used continuously without any damage would naturally be recalled by it. Xiaomu had once carefully calculated that when the Tianji treasure blueprint activated its 5th layer of offense, it could currently continuously fire out 18 types of hidden weapons in a single second. Who could withstand such a wave of attacks? 1 second was just the blink of an eye. When the Tianji treasure blueprint was summoned, one would basically die on the spot. At this moment, Xiao Mu summoned this Tianji treasure blueprint out from her conscious, and she coldly swept her gaze across the 30 masked men in gray. Since she said that she would make all of these people stay, then she would naturally fulfill her promise. With a move of her mystic conscious, the Tianji treasure blueprint unfurled in front of everyone. It stretched for several meters and was enveloped in golden light. Arbor sat on the snow leopard's back and coldly gazed at the group of masked men in gray. Secretly, an endless stream of mystic conscious frantically surged into the Tianji treasure blueprint. A hint of faintly frightened expression appeared on the faces of all the masked men. Chapter 1704. In the next moment, everyone saw the Tianji treasure blueprint release streaks of dazzling light that were extremely intense and dazzling. The dazzling light formed a beam of light that directly shot into those bodies. Instantly, dozens of masked men in gray bore the brunt of the attack and were savagely torn to shreds by the dazzling light. The might of the attack was so great that the 20 masked men behind him trembled in fear when they saw it. Without even thinking about it, those gray-robed men all retreated backwards to hide. However, was that possible? How could the Tianji treasure blueprint be so easy to hide from? What awaited them was only the fate of being exterminated. When the Tianji treasure blueprint was opened, it attacked indiscriminately and directly killed nearly 200 mystic cultivators. Now, these 30 spiritual cultivators paled in comparison. They were simply not enough to fill the gaps between the Tianji treasure blueprint's teeth. So what if they were spiritual cultivators? Even if Arbor did not open the Tianji treasure blueprint, these little spiritual cultivators below level 7 might not necessarily be at a disadvantage if they fought side by side with little Snow and Cho-Cho. She was just too lazy to do it herself anymore. Since they wanted to die so much, she would grant their wish. The leading masked man in gray broke out in a cold sweat that dripped down his forehead. However, before he could open his mouth to beg Arbor for mercy, the Tianji treasure blueprint's indiscriminate attack had already arrived in front of him. That strange beam of light caused a trace of extreme fear in his heart. What kind of hidden weapon was this? Arbor looked curiously at the hundreds of mirrors that suddenly jumped out of the Tianji treasure blueprint. These mirrors seemed to be arranged in a very orderly manner. When the light beams that intertwined with each other landed on a person's body, they could actually directly penetrate the body of a spiritual cultivator below level 4. It could be seen that Senior Tianji Z was most likely well versed in mechanisms, hidden weapons, and even formations. However, Senior Xuanji actually wanted such a powerful senior to use her strength to crush his disciple. This was truly a strange request. In the future, she really would have to make things difficult for Senior Tianji Z's personal disciple. The Tianji treasure map created by Senior Tianji Z had given her a lot of help. When she thought about how she would be forced to make things difficult for his personal disciple in the future, Miss Chiao felt a sense of indescribable emotions. By the time the late headmaster Yun arrived, Xiaomu had already set off a ring of fire outside the cave, burning those masked gray-clothed people clean before running away. Yun Fei glanced at the mountain forest that had almost been razed to the ground in astonishment. Then, he could only click his tongue in admiration. It was rare for Ah Sun's disciple to be so vicious and merciless. Looking at the burnt corpses on the ground, there were at least 30 people here. But now, those people who wanted to kill Miss Chiao had all left this world. Yun Zong sighed inwardly. After erasing all traces of Miss Chiao's presence in the area, he quietly left. When Fan Gu sent out another group of people to search the area, the news they brought back caused Fan Gu to be extremely furious. There's no trace at all. Without a trace. How could there be no trace at all? She had clearly sent out 30 level 4 spiritual cultivators to capture Arbor, so why did they disappear without a trace? Fan Gu flew into a rage and raged within the Clear Heaven sect. Fan Chioha comforted her and sent out a portion of the Clear Heaven sect disciples to secretly inquire about Arbor. However, ever since Arbor had entered the top academy, it had been difficult for news to spread. Chapter 1705. After dealing with the evil creatures of the Clear Sky faction, Arbor was naturally in a good mood. She summoned the green wand and took it back to the lava mountains. The green wand let out a cry. As soon as it flew to the foot of the mountain, it saw a thrilling scene. Two huge black, unknown corpse birds were attacking a caravan passing by Chi-Chi Mountain. The two corpse birds were 2/3 the size of the green wand. There was not a single strand of hair on their wings, leaving only bits and pieces of rotten flesh hanging on them. The two corpse birds were attacking the caravan, and there were casualties in the caravan. The women and children were shrieking in terror as they retreated. The leader of the caravan was a middle-aged man. He was about to lead the caravan to Anka City, but they were attacked by corpse birds before they passed by Chi-Chi Mountain. It was not that the caravan had not encountered dirty things like corpse puppets along the way, but the two corpse birds this time were so big that they could not deal with them. When the two corpse birds swooped down from the sky, they were so fast that they were dazzling. The two frightened women sat paralyzed on the ground, unable to escape at all. Just as one of the corpse birds was about to tear her arm with its claws, the sharp cry of a green one came from the sky. A crossbow arrow with a black light shot into the corpse bird's claws with a whoosh. The two corpse birds let out unpleasant cries and flapped their wings to fly to the side. Arbor fired 5 consecutive arrows with her crow crossbow. Not to mention 2 corpse birds, even 4 or 5 of them would be shot down by her. There were many women and children in the caravan. They must have paid part of their supplies and followed the caravan to Anka City for food and clothing. However, many of them did not expect that Anka City would be right in front of them, but they did not even have the chance to enter the city alive. After pressing down on Qinghuan, Xiao Mu jumped down gracefully from Qinghuan's back. The 2 corpse birds lay on the side of the mountain road, dying. Only their wings moved slightly. Arbor walked forward without a word, pulled out a dagger, and dug out the crystal cores in the heads of the 2 corpse birds. The remaining members of the caravan looked at her with pale faces and trembling lips. They didn't know why, but when they saw how skillful she was in digging out the crystal cores, they felt a little emotional. She was so young, but her little face was expressionless, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts. The leader quickly walked up and cupped his fists respectfully at Xiao Mu. "Honorable Miss, thank you for saving our entire caravan. If it wasn't for Arbor's help, their team would have been wiped out." Arbor just nodded at him with an indifferent expression. To be honest, she had stopped when she saw that there was a crystal core in the heads of these 2 corpse birds. As for saving them, it was just a matter of convenience. Therefore, whether these people thanked her or not was actually not that important to Xiao Mu. "Miss, we are from the Jean Mantang mercenary group. This is just a small token of our respect." Arbor was stunned. She looked at the small bag of things that the leader handed to her and shook her head. "It's nothing. You don't have to give me this." Looking at the travel-worn people in the caravan, they didn't look like rich people. Why would she want to exploit them? "Take it, Mississippi. This is a small token of our Jean Mantang mercenary group's appreciation." "I can't take it anymore. I'll wake up and catch up on the second watch." Chapter 1706. "No, you must accept it." The captain of the Jean Mantang mercenary group was a man in his early 30s with a short black beard. At this time, he sincerely handed the small bag back to Xiao Mu and earnestly said, "If it weren't for Miss saving us, we would all be dead by now. This is just a small token of appreciation from our Jean Mantang mercenary group. Please accept it. It's not much, it's just a small bag of ordinary food. Please don't refuse it anymore." Seeing the team leader's sincere expression, Xiaomu nodded and accepted the small pouch he handed over. At this moment, cries filled the mountain path. Due to the attack earlier, the caravan suffered quite a lot of casualties. He saw a middle-aged man holding a broken body and crying for a while. Then, he stood up shakily and walked to the leader. He shouted at him angrily, "Captain Jean. Didn't you say that we're about to reach Anka City and that there's no more danger? Why did my son die? Why didn't you save my son first? I hired your mercenary group to ensure our safety during the caravan's journey, but what did you do? You'd rather save a lowly woman than save my son. I want you to pay with your life. Give my son back, give him back." The middle-aged man wailed. There was a woman half-kneeling next to him with her head drooped. She was trembling and hugging herself into a bowl. It was clear that she was also in great shock earlier. It turned out that the middle-aged man's son was attacked at the same time as another woman in the caravan. Captain Jean did not say who he was going to save or not. He only saved the woman because she was closer to him, so it was more convenient for him to save her. The middle-aged man's son was killed in the sudden attack. The Jean Mantang mercenary group accepted a mission to protect the caravan, and the middle-aged man was considered a big boss who paid the majority of the money. In addition, the mercenary group also accepted a few small missions at the same time, including bringing some old, weak, women, and children to Anka City. Back then, Captain Jean had discussed with the middle-aged man and said that he would waive a portion of his fees if he brought the old, weak, women, and children with him, and the middle-aged man readily agreed. Now, he was telling him that he shouldn't save others but his son. But to Captain Jean, as long as it was a member of his caravan, he would treat everyone equally regardless of their status. However, the middle-aged man didn't think so. He thought that since he was the big boss who paid the money, the Jean Mantang mercenary group should first protect his and his son's safety. However, things didn't go as he wished. His son actually died in this attack, so he couldn't accept this fact. Just as the middle-aged man was about to pounce over and yell at Captain Jean, the middle-aged man suddenly stopped. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his chest as he was sent flying with a kick. He landed heavily on the ground. The other survivors of the caravan were sobbing. When they turned their heads, they saw the middle-aged man being kicked to the ground. Looking up, they saw the little girl who had just saved them staring at the middle-aged man coldly. "He's been captured. Take care of him." After Arbor said this, he turned around and jumped onto Qing Yuan's back. He touched Qing Yuan's head and whispered, "Let's go." Chapter 1707. Qing Yuan flapped its wings and flew into the air. Arbor turned to look at Captain Jean and said indifferently, "If you don't want the remaining people to be wiped out, you should get rid of everything that needs to be dealt with without mercy." After speaking, Arbor sat on Qing Yuan and left without looking back. Captain Jean turned to look at the middle-aged man who was trembling all over. His face was deathly pale as he kept muttering, "No, no, no," while retreating step by step. Captain Jean sighed and waved his hand. Two of his teammates darted out from behind him and twisted the middle-aged man's arm. Actually, the attack this time had caused the Jean Mantang mercenary group to lose at least a third of their members. It was a huge blow to the Jean Mantang mercenary group. Originally, their Jean Mantang mercenary group was just a small 2-star mercenary group. As the leader, he only had the strength of a level 15 body cultivator. Once a body cultivator reached level 15, they were basically at their limit. Any higher would only increase their body's resistance to attacks. Unlike mystic cultivators, they could break through the spirit realm and take a step towards becoming a spirit master. The number of mystic cultivators and spirit masters on the 6 prefectures continent was definitely much higher than in the lower star field. However, although the people of the 6 prefectures continent lived in a place filled with spirit energy, this spirit energy was so thin that it was almost negligible. In reality, the only place with dense spirit energy that could speed up cultivation was a spirit realm. However, this kind of treasured land that could only be discovered by chance required one to encounter it. It wasn't as if any random person could find a spirit realm wherever they went. Therefore, when 3 spirit realms were dug out from Brinset Island, it was obvious that the 6 prefectures went crazy over it. The people who lived the most in the 6 prefectures continent were actually still normal people. The number of people on this continent was more than 100 times that of the lower star field Seacombe planet. Relatively speaking, the number of mystic cultivators and spirit masters should naturally be more than 100 times that of Seacombe planet. At first glance, mystic cultivators seem to be everywhere on the 6 prefectures continent, but in reality, compared to the population of the entire continent, those who could become mystic cultivators were only 1 in 10,000 people. Those who could become mystic cultivators and enter the spirit realm were pitifully few. Arbor bid farewell to the caravan and sat on Qingyuan to return to his academy. The trip back and forth didn't take long. Previously, she had said that she would need a day's time so that she would have more time. In fact, the round trip only took 4 to 6 hours, and they would probably be back at the lava mountains in the afternoon. Master Silver, I seem to smell the scent of rainbow mushrooms. Arbor was slightly taken aback. He raised his hand and patted Qiuqiu's head. Rainbow mushroom. She had heard of the rainbow mushroom before. The 7-colored mushroom was a very special medicinal ingredient. It was the raw material for making the flying pill. Everyone knew that mystic cultivators above level 7 could fly on their own for a short period of time. But when flying, it would definitely consume his own profound energy. Therefore, no mystic cultivator would foolishly fly from the northern part of the country to the southern part. That was simply impossible. Most of the time, they would choose to use flying profound beasts to fly in their place. But the rainbow mushroom was a very strange thing. If a flight pill made from this material was a high-grade flight pill, its effect could be said to be incomparably good, make up for yesterday's 2 chapters. Chapter 1708. People who took the high-grade flying pill could fly for at least 4 hours unimpeded, and their flying speed was comparable to an eagle's. Arbor couldn't help but stare blankly. Qiuqiu's nose was too sensitive. Where did you smell the 7-colored mushroom? Master, just now, I smelled the 7-colored mushroom in the small bag that the mercenary captain handed you. Oh. Arbor stared blankly. When Captain Jean gave her the small bag, she casually put it in her inner world without checking what it was. At this time, she took the small bag out of her inner world and set up a defensive barrier around her body to block the fierce wind outside. Xiaomu opened the small food bag that Captain Jean gave her and poured out the contents, spreading them on the hem of her skirt. These were indeed small mushroom-like things. So Captain Jean was right. This was originally a small bag of food, and the amount wasn't much. It was just a small token of his appreciation. To Arbor, such a small bag of mushrooms was really not enough. On her paradise planet, all kinds of vegetables were now thriving, so there was naturally no shortage of mushrooms. Actually, she didn't need these things from him, but it wouldn't be good if she insisted on not accepting Captain Jin's food. Perhaps others would think that they owed her a big favor and feel uneasy all day. So when she saw Captain Jean like this, she reached out to take it in order to make him feel at ease. But she didn't expect that there would be a 7-colored mushroom mixed in with this pile of mushrooms. This 7-colored mushroom was actually a very strange thing. It was called a 7-colored mushroom, but in fact, it didn't emit 7 colored colors. It looked a bit like a shiitake mushroom, gray and dull. It was really hard to find clues mixed in with a small bag of mushrooms. Arbor took out the small 7-colored mushroom and handed it to Chocho. Can this still prolong its life? When the men of the mercenary corps picked mushrooms, they definitely didn't treat them as treasures. They all just twisted and turned to pick them. Master, don't worry. This 7-colored mushroom is still easy to cultivate. It can't be weaker than spirit tea. Just keep it in our paradise planet. Arbor nodded and gave the mushroom to Sapling. This trip confirmed that Tan-Fa was closely related to the Clear Sky Gate. In addition, he had also unexpectedly obtained a rainbow mushroom, which could be considered as quite a harvest. Arbor returned to the academy peak. Before he could return to his room, he was stopped by Qi Xianxian, who had heard the news. Jojo, where have you been? Why didn't you bring us along? Qi Xianxian tugged at her sleeve and said unhappily, I was worried about you. I'm fine. Arbor turned around and nodded at her. Go and deal with Tan-Fa. Qi Xuanxuan's face was filled with surprise as she cried out, Is that the man who pulled the carriage and ran away from the teleportation formation? Arbor nodded. Are you all right then? Qi Xianxian was still worried. She grabbed her and looked her up and down. Seeing that she wasn't injured, she heaved a sigh of relief and lightly punched her. Why are you acting alone for such a big matter? Arbor blinked and shook his head. It's not a big matter. I can handle it myself. That won't do. Don't forget that we're in the same team. Naturally, we have to shoulder the responsibility together. Xianxian is right. Chapter 1709. The little fatty popped out from the small earthen hut next door and told Xiao Mu sternly, Chow Chow, it's hard to avoid worrying people when you suddenly ran off on Qinghuan. Don't do this again next time. Yes. No matter what, you have to discuss it with us first. We're teammates in the same boat. Upon hearing this, Xiao Mu nodded seriously and said, okay. Only then did Qi Xianxian smile. Reaching out, she grabbed her little hand and laughed, Here, it's a deal. You're not allowed to act alone next time. Arbor nodded obediently. Qi Xianxian tilted her head and smiled. Chow Chow, when you left, the two groups that were in a dilemma have already been divided. Other than the three of us, Duanmu Qing is in the same team as us. As for Ma Ta, ha 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 ha. Qi Xianxian couldn't help but laugh loudly when she mentioned Ma Ta's expression. What happened? Arbor was slightly startled and turned to look at Qi Xianxian, who was laughing non-stop. Qi Xianxian's laughter infected little fatty, who was standing at the side, and he started laughing as well. Ma Ta and big brother Duanmu competed in martial arts. They said that the winner would stay. You know the result. Qi Xianxian laughed loudly. You didn't see it then. After Ma Ta lost, he felt like the sky was falling down. He looked like he was about to cry. Xiao Mu smiled faintly, an extremely faint smile on her lips. Qi Xuanxuan's eyes widened and she suddenly screamed, Jojo. You're smiling. Qi Xianxian suddenly reached out and cupped little fatty's face, revealing an exaggerated expression. Am I smiling? Let me see. Little fatty hurried forward and asked anxiously. From what he remembered, this little guy who had been expressionless since the first time they met seemed to have never smiled. Xiao Mu sighed softly as she looked at their exaggerated appearances in exasperation. Little did they know that behind them, Duanmu Qing was looking at the three of them chatting and laughing under the setting sun. He was in a daze. The sun was setting. Under the illumination of the red sun, the entire lava mountain range was enveloped in a sea of red. They couldn't tell if it was the heat emitting from the lava mountain range or the illumination from the setting sun. Duanmu Qing only felt that the smile of the girl in front of him was as if the fog had dissipated. It was also as if the spring breeze had brushed past the willows and melted the snow. Her appearance was extremely refined. In a trance, he seemed to see a faint shadow slowly walking over from the other side of the road. The shadow smiled at him and called faintly, "Brother Qing." Life at Arbor's top academy began. Every day was spent in a state of chaos. The instructors of the 5 departments took turns. Don't think that he only had to face one type of spirit faculty instructor. In fact, even if it was a wood spirit faculty instructor, all the students had to be present when he was teaching Duanmu Qing. Just like what the instructor said, even if you can't control this type of spiritual power, you have to understand it, or even conquer it. You have to grasp its weakness so that in the future, you can quickly find the opponent's weakness and defeat it in one blow. Early in the morning, on the spacious arena of the Lava Mountain Range's Academy peak, Xiao Mu was wearing a light wood-colored short-sleeved shirt, and she had braided her long hair behind her head. He stretched out his hand and a long transparent water spirit whip appeared. Chapter 17:10. Senior Brother Lu, please guide me. Arbor was fully focused when facing a level 2 spiritual master with a level 7 earth spirit. Junior Sister Qiao, please. The other party cupped his fists in greeting and nodded slightly. 2 figures flitted into the arena at an amazing speed. Once they attacked, spirit energy surged and the wind howled. Ma Ta, who was squatting on the side watching the 2 fight, hugged his head and cried out pitifully, "It's over, it's over, it's over, we're going to lose again. We're going to lose again. We're going to lose our points again." Hua Tao couldn't help but ask, "Why do you always lower your own prestige for others' sake?" "I'm not trying to lower my prestige. It's you, Senior Brother Hua Tao. When you fought with Junior Sister Qiao on the first day, didn't you get thrown out of the circle with one hand and couldn't even withstand a single move? Senior Brother Lu's cultivation is about the same as yours. Do you think he can win?" "Shut up." Hua Tao glared fiercely at Ma Ta. "Hey, no one will think you're a mute if you don't open your mouth. Besides, I merely underestimated my opponent that day. Can you not keep bringing that up? That day, he didn't even manage to withstand a single move from the little girl before being thrown out of the circle. This was practically a lifetime of black material. Senior Brother, I don't want to talk about it either. But look, Senior Brother Lu only has the strength to defend himself. Sai, Junior Sister Qiao is very savage. Shoo shoo shoo. Hua Tao kicked him. Shut up. Even if we lose this round, there are still 3 more rounds. Even if we take a step back and say that Duanmu Qing wins, the other 2 brats absolutely aren't our match. No matter how you think about it, it's still a draw. What's the rush? A draw is even worse." Ma Ta hugged his head and wailed. With his familiarity with the mentor's personalities, they absolutely wouldn't let them fight so easily. In the arena, the little girl's water spirit whip moved and lashed out one move after another at Senior Brother Lu. Senior Brother Lu and the mentors were all astonished. The little girl was merely a leveled 15 mystic cultivator who had yet to break through to the spiritual realm. It was already very shocking that she could barely use the power of the water spirit. But now, her spirit energy was actually endless. He clearly did not have a spiritual pulse, so how could his spiritual energy be stronger than his? Senior Martial Brother Lu somersaulted into the air and landed on a nearby rock. He cupped his fists and smiled. Junior Martial Sister Qiao, Senior Martial Brother has lost. Everyone focused their eyes and saw a faint shadow of a whip on Senior Brother Lu's chest. It was caused by the water spirit whip. Maud sighed. What should we do? Looks like it's really going to be a draw. He had a very bad premonition. After a draw, they would definitely suffer. The most pitiful thing was that he didn't know what the mentors would do to them. Jojo is the best. Qi Xianxian smiled and jumped up. She ran forward and held on to Arbor's arm. She smiled and said, Jojo, I knew you would win. Next match, Group 2 Ko Hongwen vs Group 1 Jiang Shaoxin. The little fatty immediately took out the double-headed hammer from his conscience and jumped onto the arena. He hollered, Senior Brother Jiang, come. Jiang Shaoxin narrowed his eyes, and a black spear appeared in his hand. Spiritual energy floated around the spear, indicating that it was a spirit weapon. Junior Martial Brother Ko, be careful. The little fatty shouted. His left foot stomped hard on the ground. His entire body was like a small cannon as he pounced towards Senior Brother Jiang Shaoxin in front of him. Chapter 1711. Qi Xianxian couldn't help but raise her hand to cover her face as she whispered to Arbor, every time I see little fatty fighting, I always feel like, there's a ball flying around in front of my eyes. Arbor pursed her lips and looked at the two people in the arena. Little Fatty was naturally not this senior brother who had already broken through to the spiritual realm. However, it was very obvious that the other party had not used his full strength, so Little Fatty could still withstand a few more blows from him. As time went by, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. It was noon, and the sun hung high above everyone's heads. The scorching heat of the lava mountain range not only made the two people in the arena sweat profusely. Even the spectators standing at the side felt faint beads of sweat on their foreheads, and their bodies were unbearably hot. With a wave of Qiao Mu's small hand, she placed the ice ball that had taken shape into a jade box with a colored glass cover and hugged it in her arms. She immediately felt her small hands become much cooler. Startled, Qi Xianxian hurriedly turned to look at her, and her eyes lit up. An icebox. Do you want it? Emichem. Arbor casually made another one for Qi Xianxian and let her hug it in her arms. Previously, when she made an ice ball and exposed it to the air, it was instantly melted by the heat of the mountain range. Now that she put the ice ball into the jade box, it could naturally maintain the coolness for a certain period of time. For the past 2 nights, Arbor had placed an ice box in each of the 4 corners of her earthen house to cool down. Otherwise, how could she sleep from the heat? Sapling had already invited her to sleep on Paradise Planet many times. But when she thought about it, she was not that delicate. Back then, she lacked water and food, and her body was as dirty as a mud monkey. Could she really not bear this small burning pain now? She naturally didn't want to go to Paradise Planet. Besides, she had already promised her teammates that they would suffer together and enjoy together. Of course, she couldn't be so disloyal. Qi Xianxian hugged the icebox and looked at the arena. Sigh, looks like it's going to be a draw again today. Speaking of which, it was normal for her and Little Fatty to be at the Mystic Realm, but Jojo was clearly not normal. A leveled 15 Mystic Cultivator was able to defeat a level 2 Spiritualist in a duel, and it could be seen that she had yet to use her full strength. This kind of combat ability simply didn't seem like the strength a normal Mystic Cultivator should have. The 4 matches lasted from day till evening, and finally ended. Arbor didn't feel anything, but the little fatty was so hungry that his stomach was rumbling. His chest was sticking to his back, and the sound of his stomach rumbling was heard by everyone present. The short mentor stepped forward with a wretched smile and said to the Arbor crowd, "Kids, you must be hungry." The little fatty shuddered for no reason. "I'm sorry to inform you that after 3 days of competition, the results of Group 1 and Group 2 are 0. Is that fucking expression of regret?" This was an expression that deserved a beating. Qi Xianxian cursed in her heart. Of course, Qi Xianxian wasn't the only one who was scolding. In fact, everyone was hungry and tired. Their bodies were so tired that they wanted to go back to their rooms to rest. Who would want to stay here and continue listening to the little tutor's nonsense? You guys can't behave like this. The little tutor shook his head and grinned. After our 5 spiritualist faculty tutors discussed it, we unanimously decided. Everyone held their breaths and waited for the bad news to arrive. I'll bring you guys to have a big meal. Ha! Chapter 17:12. Who knew what the instructors were thinking? The students, who thought that they would definitely be scammed again, had strange expressions on their faces when they found themselves in a small tavern in Anka City. Do you think the instructors will be so kind? Little Fatty asked hesitantly. Are we going to starve to death if we don't eat? Qi Xianxian snapped. We'll only have the energy to continue training and fighting when we're full. That's true. Little Fatty calmed himself down and nodded. He turned his head to look at the plate of meat buns that was being served. His stomach, which was so hungry that it was bulging, immediately made a series of noises. Eat. Xiao Mu casually picked up a bun and handed it to him. Thank you, Jojo. Little Fatty chuckled and took the bun. He opened his mouth and was about to take a bite. Suddenly, Mata jumped up in shock. Wait! Little Fatty's mouth was agape. It was as if his acupoints had been hit. He stared blankly at Mata, who had suddenly attacked him. Did you guys notice? The atmosphere here is quite strange. Everyone's gazes followed Mata's words and wandered around the tavern. Now that he took a look, it was indeed true. There were 5 to 6 tables in the tavern. Everyone was dressed in plain clothes and had weapons by their side. They were eyeing the 8 people at the table with hostility. Little Fatty held his meat bun tightly with both hands and ate it in big bites. However, his eyes were vigilant as he looked at the people at the other tables. Qi Xianxian turned her head and saw the waiter running over with a tray in his hands. There were 8 bowls of noodles on the tray, but the waiter walked as if he was walking on flat ground. He brought the noodles to them effortlessly. Duanmu Qing nodded slightly and took the bowl of noodles from the waiter. He glanced at the waiter and asked, "Where are we?" After the instructors sent them here, they disappeared one after another. If they still didn't know that they had been tricked by these unreliable instructors, then they would be really stupid. The waiter stopped in his tracks and grinned at Duanmu Qing. Don't you know, my friends? Aren't you here to sign up for the underground arena tournament? What? The 8 of them were all stunned, their eyes filled with confusion. What are you pretending for? Why would an ordinary person come to such a remote tavern to eat noodles? He's obviously here for the bounty. That's right. Since you're here, stop pretending. The people at the tables next to them began to verbally attack them. Many pairs of eyes were looking at them with unfriendly gazes. Underground arena tournament. What was that? Duanmu Qing glanced at the waiter and asked, "We have indeed never heard of the underground battle arena tournament." What a joke. They were just here to eat a bowl of noodles, fill their stomachs, and leave. Of course, if the instructors wanted to screw them over, that would be a different story. Who is young Master Duanmu? A little beggar ran in with a smile, holding a letter in his hand. Duanmu Qing was stunned and nodded at him. I am. Young Master Duanmu, someone gave this to you. The little beggar ran over with a smile and handed the letter to Duanmu Qing. He shook his body shyly. The person who delivered the letter said that as long as I hand the letter to young Master Duanmu, young Master will reward me. Chapter 17:13. Fuck, this is definitely something that the mentors would do. Duanmuqing smiled good-naturedly at the little beggar. He reached into his pocket and took out a money pouch. Then, he took out 2 spirit coins and handed them to the little beggar. The expressions of the people at the other tables changed instantly. Fuck. Where did this rich guy come from? How could he flaunt his wealth like this? His life was so poor, but he was rewarded with 2 spirit coins for delivering a letter. Which family's young master was so generous? Were they really here to participate in the underground arena tournament? If not, why were they here? If that was the case, with this young master's extravagant family background, why would they need to fight so hard for 1,000 spirit coins? Duanmuqing opened the letter and skimmed through it. After a short while, he sighed softly and handed the letter to Arbor and the others. Take a look. It was a letter from the mentors. The letter read, "Children, all of our mentors have made a unanimous decision. We've decided to let you live in Anka City for the next 30 days. Within 30 days, your 2 groups must have an average of more than 1,000 points in the underground arena. Your ranking must be within the top 50 on average. Then, the mentors will come and take you home. Otherwise, don't blame the mentors for cheating you. You can continue to play in the underground arena." The signature was, "Love to you, Mentor Wei Wei. I fucking love your ancestors." Arbor could not help but curse in her heart. No wonder she regretted it the second day after entering this academy. It was truly the misfortune of 3 lifetimes to have encountered such an unreliable academy and such a deceptive group of mentors. The 8 of them looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. Hey, hey, hey. Look, look. There's a small note at the back of the letter. It says that you can't summon your mystic beasts in the first 28 days of the tournament. What does that mean? The little fatty exclaimed with a dazed expression. It means that you can't use your god-level tortoise. Qi Xianxian pursed her lips in annoyance. How can you cheat us like this? Is it too late for us to leave the academy? If you're not afraid of being hunted down by the Vice Academy Master, then take off your clothes, Senior Brother Lu said indifferently with tea in his hands. I'll strip your sister. Qi Xianxian sat down on the stool dejectedly. The delicious noodles in front of her didn't taste that good anymore. Wait, there's a small note here. It was written that in the first 28 days, he was not allowed to use any supplementary items, including talismans, medicines, hidden weapons, or any artifact above the level of a divine artifact. What the fuck, then what else can he use? Mata complained. Also, who the fuck has a divine artifact? Arbor scratched his head silently and turned his face to the side. What do you mean by the first 28 days? Let me ask you. Just now, the instructor said that we would be staying here for a few days. 30 days. Duanmuqing gave a clear answer. Everyone's lips twitched when they heard this. You motherfucker told us not to use any support for 28 days, and that's only 30 days in total. For 28 days, he had to resist. In the remaining 2 days, even if he fought 30 matches, it would be impossible for him to catch up. Then what else can we use? Use the big head. Use your big head to fight others. Use your brains and see how you can use your true strength to win. Everyone looked up at the sky, speechless. Chapter 17:14. Oh. It's written here that you can use spirit weapons. You can even fight as a team. Jojo, what should we do? Our divine beasts can't be used. Qi Xianxian turned to Arbor with a bitter expression. Arbor was the one who was truly bitter. He had a feeling that this line of small words was definitely directed at him. She couldn't use divine beasts, talismans, poisons, hidden weapons, and even divine weapons. If it wasn't directed at her, why would she not be able to use this and that? She was so angry. Just like what little Fatty said, what else could she use? Could it be that she could only use her big head to fight with others? Second brother, how can we enter the underground battle arena? The second brother turned around and grinned at them. As long as you pay enough spirit coins and get a VIP card for the underground battle arena, you can enter. How much? Chi Xian and Little Fatty asked in unison. 100 spirit coins per person. What? Chi Xian, Little Fatty, Mata, Hua Tao, and the others all had terrified expressions on their faces. They glared at little second brother as if they wanted to swallow him whole. This kid was asking for too much, wasn't he? Could it be that Duanmu Qing's display of wealth had caused this fellow to have evil thoughts? Their suspicions were not wrong at all. The second brother who delivered the noodles really had the idea of getting rich because of Duanmu Qing's display of wealth. Anyway, young Master Duanmu was rich and didn't care about the entrance fee. Arbor glanced at the second brother coldly. Are you tired of living? Everyone was speechless. That's right. Are you tired of living? Ha! You dare to cheat me. Chi Xian kicked one of the long stools, and it instantly turned into sawdust. The waiter was shocked, but on the surface, he still smiled faintly at Chi Xian. Ladies and gentlemen, this little one is not speaking nonsense. The VIP card for the underground battle arena does indeed cost 100 spirit coins per person. If you can't pay the fee, of course you can't go in. Arbor sneered and glanced at him. His figure moved and he floated in front of the waiter. She stretched out her hand and her cold fingers immediately grabbed the waiter's neck. With a light pinch, there was a slight cracking sound, as if the waiter's neck would break in her hands in a matter of minutes. The waiter's expression changed in shock. His mouth opened and his face flushed red, but he still couldn't help but stubbornly say, Auntie, you have to think carefully. This is the largest Qianluo underground arena in Anka City. Offending the master of our 1,000 Luo arena is of no benefit to a little girl like you. Oh. Arbor glanced at him indifferently. You're just a waiter. How can you have so much power? Would the owner of your underground fighting arena be so angry for you? Little second brother's face turned red when he heard that. Of course, he knew that he didn't have that much power. However, it was more important to scare the young lady in front of him and get her to release him. However, how could Xiao Mu be intimidated by him? How much is the entrance fee? 10 spirit coins. How much? Xiao Mu shouted coldly and increased the force in her hand, scaring the waiter to death. Don't want money, don't want money. Arbor pushed him back forcefully and stretched out her hand. Give it to me. Today ended. Chapter 17:15. The waiter trembled as he took out 8 jade tokens and distributed them to the 8 of them. The people at the nearby tables were all a little stunned by what they saw. What was going on? There were actually people who dared to cause trouble at the entrance of Qianluo's underground battle arena. These immature brats and maidservants were really bold. Did they not know how powerful Qianluo's underground battle arena was in Shuntian Prefecture? So what if they were allowed to enter the battle arena for free? When the time came, it would be like catching a turtle in a jar. In Qianluo's underground battle arena, wouldn't they have to obediently fork out money to buy a VIP token? A trace of indignation flashed across the waiter's eyes, but he still respectfully said to the crowd, Everyone, please follow me. Arbor's group of 8 followed the waiter to the back of the tavern. The waiter stepped forward and pushed open a mud wall, revealing a narrow passageway behind. Everyone, please. The waiter lowered his eyes, hiding the cold smile in his eyes. So what if that lady had some tricks up her sleeve? He had already informed the manager of the battle arena. Once they entered, they would be in for a good time. Arbor naturally did not miss the hatred in the waiter's eyes. However, she did not care. A small battle arena's gatekeeper dared to cheat her, Arbor. Who gave him the guts? Although she was not someone who cared about the 100 spirit coins, she was unhappy that someone dared to cheat her of her money. Why didn't he go out and ask around? Was her darling Chow's money so easy to cheat? Duanmu Qing and the rest bent slightly and passed through the narrow door. They were the first to enter the underground battle arena's passageway. This passageway could only allow one person to pass through. The 8 of them entered in a single file, with the little fatty at the back. Following that, many other people entered. They should be people from other tables in the tavern who had already paid for their tickets. The 8 of them followed the long passageway to the end and stepped onto a round platform carved with a fierce tiger. They saw a row of talismans drawn around the platform. It should be a small talisman array. What talisman array is this? Is it a transportation talisman array? Qi Xianxian asked Arbor softly. No. Arbor shook her head indifferently. It's a safety talisman array. Oh. Qi Xianxian replied. At the end of the tunnel came the sound of a mechanism being pulled. Her feet suddenly moved, and she felt as if she was falling. She couldn't help but reach out and grab Arbor's little hand. Xiao Mu grasped her arm in return and patted it soothingly, indicating for her not to be nervous. The mechanisms and formations of the underground battle arena were set up very exquisitely. In just a short moment, the round platform beneath their feet fell down at a uniform speed until it embedded itself into a jade platform. Only then did it come to a complete stop. Qi Xianxian heaved a sigh of relief. She raised her head and saw many battle arena guards swarming in from all directions, surrounding them. On the platform, there were some idlers at other tables in the tavern. Seeing this, they hurriedly raised their hands and exclaimed, "We're not together. We're not together. Yes, yes, we paid for it." The guards of the arena were ready for battle. They surrounded Arbor and the others with swords and sabers in their hands. Every one of them looked as if they were facing a great enemy. "Why are you all crowding around here?" An indifferent voice traveled from behind the crowd to everyone's ears. "Young Master is here. Young Master. Young Master." The guards of the battle arena all turned around and respectfully bowed to the person who had arrived. Chapter 17-16. The crowd parted to the sides like a tide. A person wearing a dark purple robe with golden sleeves walked over like a flower parting a willow. He was like jade, his hair was long, and his eyes were seductive. His elegant features originally contained a distant and cold smile, but when he met Xiao Mu's eyes, he was slightly startled. The icy expression on his face instantly disappeared, and he revealed a smile that was as scorching as the sun. "Jojo." That person swept his sleeves and walked quickly to Arbor's side. He looked at her with a smile and said, "What a surprise to meet you here. Tell me, isn't this called fate brings us together 1,000 miles apart?" Arbor looked at the man in front of her expressionlessly. She took a step back without leaving a trace, widening the distance between them. "Who are you?" "Jojo, I'm sad to hear you say that." The man looked at her pitifully, with a tearful expression. He reached out and tore open his lapel. "Look, the mark you left on me hasn't been erased. How could you forget about me? I'm so sad, Jojo, you trampled on my sincerity, it really hurts." Arbor's cold gaze fell on the shallow sword mark below his collarbone. That was the wound she had caused with her own hands. "You're ding ting ding. This should be Ding Ting Ding's true appearance. She already couldn't remember how many times he had changed his appearance. One moment he was the snake beauty, the next he pretended to be the kid with the iron pot, and the next he pretended to be her mother to deceive her and hurt her mother. Would such a person really have sincerity? What kind of bullshit sincerity could such a playboy who didn't know fatigue have? So, don't joke around. Arbor looked at him coldly. There was no fluctuation in her gaze, as if she was looking at a cold corpse. There was no warmth in her eyes. Jojo, why are you looking at me like that? The man covered his heart with one hand and pretended to be sad. It's so uncomfortable. Jojo is looking at me like I'm a dead man. Does he really want me to die? If I say hope, will you go and die? Xiao Mu's callous voice instantly caused everyone's breathing to stop. Cold Master Ding's gaze fell on the little girl's face, which was as cold as snow. For a long time, he couldn't make a sound. Jojo, you've really forgotten everything. You don't remember anything, right? Cold Master Ding sighed softly. Her pair of beautiful eyes that were brimming with vigor gradually lost their light and shadow, leaving behind only darkness. Arbor couldn't help but stare at him with a frown. Of course, she knew now that she had spent a day with him when she was afflicted with the speed cultivation talisman. 2 days. He couldn't remember it at all. However, did he need to look at her with such a sad expression? They weren't familiar with each other in the first place, so why pretend to be familiar with each other? Cold Master Ding's sorrowful mood came and went quickly. His eyes instantly glowed with vigor again. That moment of sadness was so quick that it was almost unnoticeable. Arbor naturally didn't notice it. The only person present who noticed the change in his mood was probably Duanmuqing. Duanmuqing didn't know why he felt that Jojo's cold expression right now was abnormally scary. That cold expression of, "You're clearly just a stranger. Why do you have to pretend to be familiar with me and pester me?" made him unconsciously feel a little flustered in his heart. Jojo, are you also here to participate in the championship? Can't I? Arbor glanced at him coldly. You can. Of course you can. Chapter 17:17. Ding Yun nodded repeatedly and stepped forward with a smile. How about I take you to register? Arbor deliberately sized him up. Is this your territory? Cold Master Ding nodded with a grin. Jojo, do you think I'm very rich? Even though Anka City was very far away from the Shuntian Prefecture continent, the fact that this person was able to open a sizable underground fighting arena in Anka City showed that he was doing quite well in the Shuntian Prefecture. Compared to small fries like Arbor, who had just ascended to the Shuntian Prefecture, he had cultivated a considerable force. Xiao Mu harumphed and couldn't be bothered with him. As Cold Master Ding walked forward, her bright eyes curiously scanned the area. Not only was the place dazzling with gold and jade, but it was also decorated with long tables. How did this look like an underground arena at all? This was clearly an underground casino. In front of every gambling table, there were many people surrounding it. They were playing dice, horse riding, cricket fighting, and all kinds of gambling methods were available. Seeing the confusion in her eyes, Cold Master Ding smiled and said, "The underground arena is still below. Follow me." Ding Yun led the group onto the passage platform. After everyone stood firmly, he reached out and pulled the mechanism. After a series of creaking sounds, Arbor and the others went down another level. This level was where the real underground arena was. As soon as the platform landed, Arbor, Qi Xianxian, and the others heard thunderous roars in their ears. They looked up and saw a slightly dark passage in front of them that led to about 9 levels of stairs. In front of the seating area was a circle of silver fences. The seats spiraled upward and could accommodate thousands of spectators. As for the center, it was naturally a large, circular arena. At this moment, two people were fighting with their lives on the arena. The spectators around them cheered as if the competition had reached the most critical moment. Arbor looked up at Ding Yun. "Follow me." Ding Yun led the group to the service area. When the two young ladies in charge of registration saw that Ding Yun had personally brought people over, they hurriedly stood up and respectfully bowed to Ding Yun. "Young master." Ding Yun nodded indifferently. Before he said anything, Arbor walked up to them and said, "Registration." The two girls were slightly stunned. They looked up at young Master Ding subconsciously and murmured, "Are you here to participate in the Underground Arena Tournament?" Arbor nodded. The Underground Arena Tournament lasts for a month. Once you participate, you'll have to fight every day. The tournament is arranged for you by our arena through public drawing. The participants have no choice but to accept the arrangement. If you're unlucky, you may have to fight 3 or 4 matches in a row. If you're lucky, you may only fight 1 match per day. Everyone, do you understand the rules of the competition? Are you ready to participate? Judging from the girl's appearance, she was only 14 or 15 years old. She was a little too young, wasn't she? However, they were brought here by young master himself. It seemed like they were young master's friends. If they were injured, young master might take his anger out on them. Therefore, the young lady had to explain the rules of the tournament to Arbor and the others. Although the prize money for this underground arena tournament was generous, it was not easy to earn. Upon hearing this, Xiaomu nodded. "Report it." To put it bluntly, it was just bad luck. They could only accept the fate of fighting one after another. What was so bad about that? Don't blame your bad luck if you're unlucky. Chapter 17-18. The two young ladies at the registration counter saw that they were all indifferent, so they nodded and said, "The competition will be based on points. 1 point will be awarded for every win, 1 point will be deducted for every loss, and no points will be awarded for draws. Do you understand?" One of the ladies at the registration counter looked at Arbor and the others. "What?" Mata, who was in the team, almost jumped up. "Only 1 point. Then why did the instructors ask for so much and ask for an average of 1,000 points? To get 1,000 points in 1 month, even if they won every single match, they would still have to go through 1,000 matches. 1,000 matches in 30 days, wouldn't they have to fight 33 matches a day on average? What the instructors were doing, was it something that humans could do? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Their expressions were extremely unsightly. On the other hand, Arbor remained expressionless as he looked at the lady at the registration counter. "Is there any way to earn points faster?" "Yes." That miss gave Xiaomu a word with absolute certainty. Then, she said excitedly, "You can participate in the team competition. If you win the team competition, you can get double the points." "Double the points is just 2 points." Little Fatty yelled at her in annoyance. "Fuck. Even if we get double the points, if we can win every single match, we would still have to fight 12 matches a day. Why don't you just go and die?" Seeing her companion's agitation, Xiaomu involuntarily twitched her mouth. She coughed lightly and looked at the stunned miss, asking, "Is there a faster way?" "Yes." The lady nodded again. "If you are very confident in your own abilities, you can fight to be the champion of the arena. If you succeed in defending the arena, you will get 1 point for the first match, 2 points for the second and third matches, and 5 points for each match from the 4th to the 10th. Everyone wanted to slap her to death. Couldn't she speak properly? Oh, your grandpa. Starting from the 11th match, you will get 10 points for every match you defend. If you succeed in defending the arena, you'll get an additional 20 points. As long as you're willing to fight, and defend the arena, it's possible for you to get more than 100 points a day. Arbor pondered for a moment, then looked up at the woman and asked, "Is it okay if the 8 of us sign up for the team competition?" The girl at the registration point shook her head vigorously. "No, each group can't have more than 5 people." "Then let's split into 2 groups to register," Arbor said calmly. He immediately left Mata's group and walked over to Duanmuqing and little fatty Qi Xianxian. "We'll sign up for the team competition." "All right." The 3 of them replied in unison. "Let's fight 2 rounds first," Arbor said. "When the time comes, I'll participate in the ring defense. In addition to the normal team competition, I'll also be able to earn more points. In this way, we'll be able to accumulate 1,000 points in about half a month and charge into the top 50. Hee hee. Another girl at the registration point couldn't help but laugh. "Do you think it's so easy to defend the arena? How many people defended the arena until they were half dead? Every time, they would be beaten up by a sea of people and thrown out of the arena. This wasn't something to joke about." Young Master Ding saw this and hurriedly said, "Jojo, you want points. That's easy, I. Scram." Chapter 17-19. Young Sir Ding was instantly aggrieved, and he gazed pitifully at Xiao Mu. "You know what I'm going to say. If you want to cheat for me, then give me 1,000 points." Xiao Mu glared irritably at Ding Yun. Was this guy a pig? If she could cheat, why would she be here talking nonsense with them? Did she need him to do her a favor and give her these points? She would have held a knife to his neck and forced him to give her the points. Humph. Just now, Senior Brother Lu had said that although the mentors didn't seem to be present, they might be hiding in the dense audience seats, waiting to watch them perform and calculate their scores. If they dared to cheat, those idiotic instructors would definitely clear all their points to 0. Let them continue to fight in this underground arena. How depressing. Arbor sighed and turned to the girl in charge of registration. "Go ahead." Compared to Arbor's team of 4, Mata felt even more dejected. He wanted to tell Jojo that they could be in one group. Anyway, the number of people in this team battle could be 5. But the way Senior Brother Lu and the other 2 looked at him was as if they were saying that if he dared to speak such nonsense, they would dare to kill him on the spot, dig a hole, and bury him. Sigh, he had no choice but to give in under the pressure. But as a teammate, although he was in Senior Brother Lu's team, his heart was with Arbor's Duanmuqing. Hua Tao patted Mata's shoulder with one hand and gave him a sinister smile. "Little Mata, don't get the wrong idea. You have to know that the instructor's letter said that the average score of each group should be above 1,000 points and be ranked in the top 50. This means that the instructor's original intention was for us to split into groups. If you dare to change our team of 4 into a team of 3, do you think the instructors will dare to cancel our results?" Mata shuddered. The instructors would definitely dare to cancel. The ladies at the registration area took out a simple contract for them to sign. The contract was simple. It was a life and death contract. It stated that they were willing to participate in this competition and that their life and death had nothing to do with the Qianluo underground arena. This meant that he was trying to distance himself from the underground fighting arena. After all, there would definitely be more than 1 or 2 contestants who would die in this battle arena tournament. Fearing that the family members of the deceased would come knocking on their door, the arena made arrangements in advance. Arbor and the others calmly signed the life and death contract, and then they were led to the preparation area. Other than those who were fighting in the arena, the rest of the contestants also had designated areas for them to rest. The contestants' area could accommodate about 1,000 people. When Arbor and the others arrived, there were already many fully armed people sitting there. Under Ding Yun's lead, the 8 people from Arbor walked into the competition area, immediately attracting the attention of many people. When they saw clearly that the one leading the group was a 14 or 15-year-old little girl, they couldn't help but be stunned. Then 2 rough men started to tease her in an unclear manner. "Yo, a little girl who's still wet behind the ears dares to come to our battle arena to challenge. TSK, look at those thin arms and legs, TSK, it's not even as thick as my thigh." Arbor's cold gaze shot like a sharp sword towards the burly man who was teasing her. He raised his hand and there was something like a washboard in his hand. Chapter 17:20. Ding Yun saw everything clearly from the side, and the corners of his eyes twitched. This really was a washboard. Jojo carried a washboard with her everywhere, so she must have made Prince Mo kneel as punishment at any time. Thinking of this, a smile appeared on young Master Ding's face. Serves him right, that stinky man should kneel to death. He actually abducted Jojo when she was unprepared, how shameful. Shameless. Arbor's washboard was actually a tribute from Di Yuan. Oh, no, it was one of the items in the pile of junk that Di Yuan had given him in the Xuanji mystic realm. Don't look down on this washboard, it was indeed a spiritual weapon. It was just shaped like a washboard. In reality, Xiaomu felt that this spiritual weapon master probably wanted to forge this washboard into something like a ferrule at the beginning. It was just that it was a bit too wide and couldn't be changed back, so its image was a bit tragic. At this moment, Xiaomu was carrying this washboard. Probably like a sudden clap of thunder, she abruptly charged toward the man who had spoken to tease her. Without any explanation, she hit the back of his head. Everyone only heard a loud smack, followed by a thud, and that man fell to the ground with a dazed expression. He watched helplessly as the little girl ran over angrily and hit him on the head with the washboard twice, directly hitting him until his eyes rolled back and he fainted. His last reaction was probably, where did this savage come from? He was just joking around a little. You're the one with skinny arms and legs. After Arbor beat him down, he glared at the other 2 men. What? You're not convinced? Cough. The 2 men almost choked on their own saliva, and hurriedly waved their hands in denial. Then, they slipped away like a wisp of smoke. When the other contestants saw this scene, although they felt that the little girl's move was a little funny, everyone was still secretly shocked. After all, this little girl used something like a washboard to knock out a 15-level body cultivator. This nimble technique really made people a little stunned. Everyone in this area would become his opponent in the future. Many people were silently observing and comparing in their hearts. They realized that if they were the burly man, perhaps they wouldn't have been able to avoid the little girl's seemingly ordinary head slams. Cough. Qi Xianxian coughed dryly in all seriousness and walked up to lead Xiaomu, who was hugging the washboard, back to an empty seat on the side. In the middle of the arena, a pair of middle-aged men were currently engaged in a bloody battle. One of the middle-aged men had the word arena hanging on his chest. He was probably the arena master. Arbor narrowed his eyes and lowered his head to look at his chest. He felt that if he were to wear a challenge sign on his chest, Qi Xianxian and the others would probably laugh at him for a year. The arena master was chased down by someone. He shouted himself hoarse as he pounded the ground with all his might. However, he still could not endure the exhaustion of his body and fell heavily to the ground. A woman beside him sighed sweetly. Sigh, what a pity. He had already defended until the 10th round and could have asked for a rest. It's a pity that no one can defend the 10th round. Arbor turned to look at that woman and raised his hand to tug at Qi Xuanchuan's sleeve. Chapter 1721. Qi Xianxian hurriedly asked, "Miss, how long can you rest after winning 10 rounds?" "About an hour." That young lady replied and nodded at Xiao Mu and the others with an amiable attitude. Qi Xianxian didn't know if the other contestants were intimidated by Jojo's washboard, so no one dared to come up and cause trouble for them. But this was good too, they could watch other people's matches in peace. Xiao Mu turned to look at young Sir Ding, who was standing beside her, and questioned with creased brows, "Are you very idle? Why don't you go do your own things?" Why did he keep following her? She wouldn't give him candy if he followed her. Young Master Ding smiled and said, "The matter of the Colosseum tournament is almost done. From now on, I will be very leisurely every day. Why don't I accompany Chow Chow to watch the tournament?" Arbor snorted and turned her head away without saying a word. Hearing that, young Master Ding couldn't help but sigh. "Jojo, I'm actually not as annoying as you think." Arbor pursed her lips and ignored him. She looked up at the center of the arena at the back, where there was a large crystal stone screen. There was a table next to the crystal screen, and several staff members of the underground arena were busy drawing lots to register the names of the participants and calculating the scores. After drawing lots, 2 employees of the arena would announce the names on the crystal stone screen at the back. The scores would be recorded under each person's name after the match. To prevent any mistakes, the arena specially arranged 3 to 4 people to check the scores. In order to ensure the fairness of this tournament, young Master Ding had put in a lot of effort and thought. Arbor turned to look at Ding Yun and saw him looking at her with a smile. Young Master Ding looked at her and said with a smile, "Jojo, let's make up, okay? Look, you stabbed me, but I didn't settle the score with you. Let's just forget about me pretending to be your mother, okay? I've also received the punishment I deserved." "What punishment do you have?" Arbor didn't believe him. He glanced at him and said, "You're still pretending to be my lotus." This made her angry, and she was almost deceived by this person. From the moment this person came into contact with her as a snake beauty, she did not have a good impression of him. She only felt that the man in front of her was slippery, which really made her angry. Young Master Ding looked at her with a pure and innocent expression like a little white rabbit and said, "Chow Chow, tell me. Whatever compensation you want, just tell me. Do you think that ceding land to Jojo would be enough?" Arbor glanced at him and snorted. "I have money. Yes, yes, Jojo is rich." Qi Xianxian nodded her head in agreement, supporting her good friend. Jojo was the richest person she had ever met. He was so rich that he could kill you with a pile of talismans and pills at any time. If Arbor could hear what Qi Xianxian was thinking, he would definitely roll his eyes at her. How was she rich? She only knew how to make medicine and talismans. Compared to other people, yes, she did have a few more ways to make a living. "What do you think of my 1,000 luo arena?" Young Master Ding suddenly pointed. Everyone was slightly taken aback. "Jojo, can I give it to you?" "No." Arbor rejected flatly. Why would she accept benefits from an outsider for no reason? They were not close. Chapter 1722. She had plenty of things like manors and shops on Seacombe Planet. How could these earthly things be more useful than her paradise planet? Jojo showed a disdainful expression, instantly making young Master Ding gloomy. "Jojo, what should we do when we fight later?" That instructor had tricked all of them. She was clearly targeting Jojo. She said they couldn't use poison, talismans, divine artifacts, and holy beasts. Fuck. They couldn't freaking use any of these and had them fight with their own abilities. Others wouldn't be so foolish as to talk about morality with them and would naturally summon their mystic beasts to fight. At that time, they would definitely be facing a team of 4 people and 4 beasts. If they were even more unlucky, it might even be 5 people and 5 beasts. Ah, Jojo, your instructor is actually so unreasonable. Young Master Ding hastily interrupted. What are you staying in this kind of academy for? Jojo, I'll introduce you to a good academy. Arbor waved her small hand and expressionlessly said, what's there to be afraid of? Everyone, take out his letter. Arbor poked Qi Xianxian. Qi Xianxian hastily took out the letter that she had fiercely crumpled into a crumpled state from her pocket. Arbor opened the letter and pointed it out to them word by word. What's written here? 7 heads, along with young Master Ding, stretched over and read in unison, can't summon mystic beasts, can't use any assistance. All assistants, including pills, talismans, and divine artifacts, can't be used. Arbor expressionlessly reached out and piled a handful of water bags on her knees. She didn't need to take medicine, but she could drink tea, right? These cheating instructors would never have thought that Arbor had a type of spiritual tea that could replenish the spiritual and mystic energy lost in the body at any time. Qi Xianxian, Ma Ta, and the others' eyes lit up. They didn't need Arbor to say anything at all as they each took a water bag and held it to their chest like it was a treasure, beaming with joy as they nodded. On the other hand, Hua Tao, Jiang Shaoxin, and Lu Yu, who didn't know what was going on, looked at each other in confusion before turning to Arbor. Arbor didn't like to explain, so he directly handed the water bags to the 3 of them. Qi Xianxian said from the side, when everyone was fighting and felt that their spiritual energy was about to be depleted, they immediately drank a mouthful of tea. Ha 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 ha. They had all consumed this tea before, so they naturally knew how effective it was. It was definitely a spiritual tea that had been revived on the spot. This time, Arbor really put in a lot of effort. She had prepared 10 cups of tea for each of the 8 people. Out of the 30 taels of expensive spiritual tea, she had used up 4 taels of 8 coins in one go. It was simply heartbreaking for her. Eat sparingly. There won't be any left after you finish it. Arbor reminded them not to waste the food. This thing was even more expensive than spirit stones. Wasting even a mouthful of it was a crime. Other than Hua Tao and the other 2 who didn't understand, the other 5 nodded their heads solemnly, indicating that they understood. Qi Xianxian turned to Hua Tao and the other 2 and reminded them kindly, drink this tea during the competition. Don't be curious and try it first. Every mouthful you drink is 1 mouthful less. You will definitely regret it later. After hearing Qi Xuanchuan's words, the 3 of them became even more curious about the tea in the water bags. Ding Yun was also curious. He blinked his black eyes at Arbor and asked, Jojo, what tea is that? Arbor snorted and proudly turned his head away. In less than 3 seconds, he turned back to look at him. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.